Chapter 276. After the elite meeting of the 10 prefectures, the Saint Origin dynasty fell into silence. However, this silence had been broken recently. As the space around the floating mountain trembled more violently, everyone knew that the Void Sword Realm, the most famous place in the Saint Origin dynasty, was about to open. All the super families and forces in the various prefectures were envious of this place. However, they were helpless as they knew that the Void Sword Realm had already been controlled by the 7 major forces. Only the elite disciples of the 7 major forces were qualified to enter. Just as Yiguchen and the rest left the Sword Whisper Mountain range, the other 6 major forces also made their moves. In the northern region of the Saint Origin dynasty, there was a towering pitch-black steel city that was built in the middle of a desolate mountain range. The steel city looked ferocious and majestic as it emitted a domineering aura. This steel city was the base of one of the 7 major forces, the Saber's Sealing Monarch Palace. At this moment, there were many disciples of the Saber's Sealing Monarch Palace gathered in front of a pitch-black cave. The leader of the disciples was a red-clothed man with a devilishly handsome face. Although he was from the human race, he emitted traces of demonic aura. The disciples of the Saber's Sealing Monarch Palace didn't dare to get too close to the devilishly handsome young man. Not long after, a powerful aura emitted from the pitch-black cave. Oh, the Divine Soul 6 transformation? Not bad. The devilishly handsome red-clothed young man curled his lips into an evil smile. A black-clothed young man slowly walked out of the pitch-black cave. He had a head of messy gray hair and a scar across the left side of his face. The most eye-catching part was his left sleeve. It was empty and it was obvious that he had lost an arm. He held a blood-red saber in his right hand and the name of the saber was Sword Burial. If Yiguchen was here, he definitely wouldn't be unfamiliar with this person. This was because this gray-haired young man was the one that Yiguchen had used the Universal Sacred Sword to cut off his left arm at the Sword Whisper Steel. He was Blood Saber Emojuechen, who was ranked 5th on the Heavenly Saber list. After Yiguchen had cut off his arm, Emojuechen had entered an even crazier cultivation. He had even entered the life and death cave that most disciples of the Saber's Sealing Monarch Palace feared. Emojuechen's cultivation had only been able to soar to the 6 transformations of the Divine Soul through such desperate training. Emojuechen looked coldly at the devilishly handsome young man and asked, "The Void Sword Realm has opened? So, that's why I'm waiting for you here." Facing Emojuechen, the demonic youth's expression remained calm and casual. "Will the sword sect go?" Emojuechen asked again. "Is the devilishly handsome Monarch Palace, the devilishly handsome young Monarch Palace, the devilishly handsome young man. Monarch 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 Palace Monarch Monarch Palace Monarch, Monarch Monarch Monarch. What a pitiful sword sect. Not only was your true chi crippled, you even encountered a madman like Emojuechen." The demonic youth revealed a gloating smile. But in the next moment, his smile vanished as he muttered to himself, "I wonder if Xian Hao, Yen Wushuang and the other freaks will go to the Void Sword domain. Only Gu Zun can deal with those guys." But Gu Zun has been in closed-door training for a whole year, and he doesn't even plan to participate in the Void Sword realm. What kind of unique skill is he comprehending, and what is he preparing to do? The demonic young man was puzzled. In the Sealing Blade Monarch Hall, there was almost no one in the same generation who could subdue him. Only Gu Zun could make the demonic youth admit defeat. On this day, the battle intent of the Saber-conferred King's Hall surged as a group of elite disciples set out. Among them were the demonic young man, Emojuechen, and the other top 10 geniuses on the Heavenly Saber list. On the other side, in the western part of the Saint Origin dynasty, there was a majestic city called Limitless City. It was located in the middle of the Heavenly Spirit Mountain range. It was a treasured place for cultivation and was filled with abundant spiritual chi. On one of the peaks, there was a young man in a black and white robe with his hands behind his back. He had long black and white hair that fluttered in the wind, and his eyes were pitch black and deep. He was like an ancient well that had no ripples. No one could see through him. He carried 2 swords on his back, one black and one white, one yin and one yang. Behind the young man stood a man in the robe of the Limitless Sword sect. If Yi Xie was here, he would definitely recognize that the man was Xian Mo of the Sun Moon Hall. Is what you said true? The black and white-haired young man asked. Senior brother Xian Hao, it's true. There is definitely a heavenly lightning in the lightning tide area. Xian Mo bowed with his hands cupped together. He was extremely respectful to the young man before him. The black and white-haired young man was Xian Hao, the prime genius of the Sun Moon Hall of the Limitless Sword sect. Very well. If Yen Wushuang and Gu Zun don't come to the Void Sword domain, no one can stop me. I must obtain the heavenly lightning and that sword skill. Xian Hao's tone was indifferent. In the next moment he stepped out of the mountain. It should be known that this was a 1,000 feet tall mountain. Before one's cultivation reached the life and death threshold and possessed wings of true qi, even an expert in the 9 changes of the divine soul realm would fall to his death. However, after Xian Hao stepped out, the space around him trembled slightly. His figure appeared a few hundred feet below as though he had teleported. After a few flashes, he had left the mountain. This made Xian Mo dumbfounded. He took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. As expected of senior brother Xian Hao. Only senior brother Xian Hao can comprehend such a peerless void sword intent. Not only that, he also has. Xian Mo's eyes were filled with envy and jealousy at the thought of this. However, he also knew that although he was also a disciple of the Sun Moon Hall, his talent and strength were far inferior to Xian Hao's. It was like a firefly compared to the bright moon. As the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, Sealed Saber Royal Hall, and Limitless Sword Sect moved out one after another, the other forces did not lag behind and sent out their best disciples. One could imagine that the trip to the Void Sword domain of the floating mountain would be a gathering of elites, and the most intense battles would unfold. It was also the time for the 7 major forces to show their abilities and compete with each other. On the airship belonging to the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, Yi Guchen stood at the side of the ship, accompanied by Mu Xingzu. As for the Divine Eagle, it had flown off somewhere. Brother Yi. Among the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, Chu Qingqi and Yi Xie walked over. What's the matter? Yi Guchen asked. I'm here to tell Brother Yi about some must-visit places in the Void Sword domain. If possible, we can join forces to prevent others from taking advantage of the situation, Chu Qingqi said in a low voice. Yi Xie also nodded slightly, apparently acknowledging Yi Guchen's ability. Oh, I'd like to hear more. Yi Guchen was a little interested. Although there are still many opportunities in the Void Sword domain that have not been discovered, there are also some places where opportunities have been discovered long ago. However, due to various reasons, it is impossible for all of them to be taken away. Over time, these places have become fixed treasure places. In the Void Sword domain, there are 3 fixed treasure places. One is the Sword Pavilion, which is the place where the Void Sword sect collected swordsmanship cultivation methods in ancient times. For example, the Void Sword technique that you took from Xian Ying was brought out from the Sword Pavilion by the disciples of the Limitless Sword sect, Chu Qingqi said. So there is such a thing. Yi Guchen suddenly realized. Void Sword sect, Void Sword technique. Just from the names, one could tell that there was some connection. In addition, there are also the Elixir Hall and the Fortune Golden Pool. They are must-visit places of opportunities. When Chu Qingqi mentioned these places of opportunities, there was obviously a trace of enthusiasm. Hearing this, Yi Guchen's heart also moved. No wonder the Void Sword domain was so famous. Putting aside the undiscovered opportunities, just these 3 places were enough to attract people's attention. After another day of flying, Yi Guchen finally saw it. At the end of the distant skyline, there was a city built with huge stones. Further away from the huge stone city, a towering mountain could be faintly seen, as if it was suspended in the void. The lower half of the mountain was completely submerged in the misty clouds. Brother Yi, we've arrived at the 100 Break City, Chu Qingqi said with a faint smile. Chapter 277. The 100 Break City was the closest city to the floating mountain. It was also because of the Void Sword realm that this city was formed. Brother Yi, The people from the 7 major forces will stay in the 100 Break City for the time being. The floating mountain's void sword realm will open in a few days, Chu Qingqi explained. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. He looked at the distant towering mountain peak in the sky and could vaguely feel that the surrounding space seemed to be shaking and distorting. The airship of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest stopped outside the 100 Break City. Yi Guchen and the others also got off the airship and entered the 100 Break City. Because the Void Sword Realm was about to open, the 100 Break City was also surging with people and bustling with noise and excitement. Although the city was a little shabby, it did not affect its popularity at all. Under the arrangement of Elder Gu Tua and Elder Qin He, the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest also booked an entire inn. Yi Guchen sat cross-legged in his room and meditated. He was ready to quietly wait for the Void Sword Realm to open. At this moment, Mu Xingzu's crisp voice came from outside the door. "Senior Brother Yi, come in." Yi Guchen opened his eyes. Mu Xingzu walked in and looked at Yi Guchen. Her face was slightly red as she said, "Senior Brother Yi, you've been cultivating all this time. Do you want to relax? For example, go shopping or something?" Mu Xingzu's voice became softer and softer as she spoke. Yi Guchen's temperament had always been cold and indifferent. It took Mu Xingzu a lot of courage to speak. Yi Guchen was slightly taken aback. There was a faint smile in his dark eyes. Mu Xingzu hurriedly said, "Xingzu saw that Senior Brother was under a lot of pressure, so I wanted Senior Brother to relax a little. Moreover, there are many things that have been leaked from the Void Sword Realm in the 100 Break City." "Oh, is that so? Then let's go shopping." Yi Guchen stood up and smiled faintly. Mu Xingzu's beautiful face revealed a happy smile. The reason why Broken City could become a city was not only because it was close to the Void Sword Realm, but also because many disciples of the 7 major forces who came out of the Void Sword Realm would bring out many strange things. Some of these things were treasures, while others were trash. Therefore, over time, the 100 Broken City market was formed to trade all kinds of things that flowed out of the Void Sword Realm. "Senior Brother Yi, Xingzhu once heard that someone had found a top-grade mystical rune weapon from the market." Along the way, Mu Xingzu said excitedly. It was obvious that after defeating Qin Lin, Mu Xingzu's suppressed naivety was revealed. "What do you like? Go and see for yourself." Yi Guchen smiled and waved his hand. Shopping was a natural instinct that no girl could avoid. Mu Xingzu blushed and nodded. Then she ran to each stall. Yi Guchen was also interested in the market. He looked at each stall. Suddenly, when he walked past one of the stalls, his sharp soul perception suddenly detected a trace of a strange fluctuation. Although the fluctuation was very subtle, Yi Guchen caught it. He glanced over and saw that there were a lot of things placed on the stall. What made Yi Guchen feel the fluctuation was a black broken wooden tablet. The word 1 was engraved on the wooden tablet. Yi Guchen's expression darkened and he walked to the stall. The stall owner was a middle-aged man who looked quite shrewd. When he saw Yi Guchen, his eyes lit up. Yi Guchen did not point out that he wanted the wooden tablet. Instead, he pointed at the 4 or 5 odds and ends around the wooden tablet and asked, "How many crystal jades are there in total?" "Oh, you really have sharp eyes. These treasures are the treasures that the elite disciples of the 7 major forces risked their lives to bring out from the Void Sword Realm. Each and every one of them is precious." The stall owner was eloquent and his words were soul-stirring. "Just say it. How many crystal jades?" Yi Guchen said lightly. Not much. 200,000 crystal jades." The stall owner's eyes flashed and he said with a smile, 200,000? Yi Guchen's eyes narrowed. Although Yi Guchen had killed many geniuses along the way, plus the resources of the Inner Yard disciples, he had more than 300,000 crystal jades on him. But this did not mean that he was willing to be treated as a fool and be at the mercy of others. Anyone with discerning eyes could see that these odds and ends were not worth many crystal jades at all. If the stall owner wants to make money, I have nothing to say. But this is a bit too much. Yi Guchen's tone was indifferent. Seeing that Yi Guchen did not seem to be able to take out 200,000 crystal jades, the smile on the stall owner's face also disappeared. His tone became cold. 200,000 crystal jades is a fair price. You have to know that these are all things brought out by the elite disciples of the 7 major forces. How can the things they bring out be ordinary? Oh, so even if the elite disciples of the 7 major forces have trash, you can still treat them as treasures? Yi Guchen's tone had a hint of playfulness. Of course. Or are you also an elite disciple of the 7 major forces? The stall owner sneered. He was also a martial artist in the 5th transformation of qi refining. Naturally, he could sense that there was no trace of genuine qi fluctuation on Yi Guchen's body. So, in his opinion, Yi Guchen was just an ordinary person who came to treasure hunt to try his luck. Yi Guchen nodded slightly and picked up a piece of broken stone on the ground. He stared at the stall owner and said, "May I ask how much crystal jades this stone is worth?" Not only was the stall owner stunned, even the people in the surrounding stalls, including some customers looking for treasures, were stunned. "Are you kidding me?" The stall owner chuckled as if he was looking at an idiot. "What if I add this?" Yi Guchen's origin ring flashed between his fingers. A violet gold token fell into his hand. He held the token and placed it in front of the stall owner. The stall owner was stunned when he saw this token. That's the token of a disciple of the Sword Sect's Forest of Pagodas. At the side, another stall owner cried out involuntarily with a trace of astonishment in his eyes. This cry caused everyone's minds to buzz, and they were unable to recover from their shock. On the other hand, the stall owner's eyes were wide open as he stared fixedly at this violet gold token. No one dared to counterfeit the identity token of an elite disciple of the 7 major forces. This stall owner was also a shrewd and knowledgeable person, so he naturally knew that this token was real. Not only that, he also knew the meaning of this token. This is the violet gold token of a disciple in the top 10 of the Sword Sect's Forest of Pagodas. The stall owner's legs went weak, and he sat down on the ground. His lips were trembling as he looked at Yi Guchen. The coldness and contempt in his eyes instantly turned into extreme shock and fear. He was actually cheating an elite disciple of a major force, and it was a disciple ranked in the top 10. "Young master? I was blind." The stall owner was so frightened that he could not speak clearly. His tongue was tied and his face flushed red. "How many crystal jades is this stone worth?" Yi Guchen still had a smile on his face. "I'll give it to you. Young master, if you take a fancy to anything, feel free to take it." "It's my honor," the stall owner hurriedly said, afraid that he would anger Yi Guchen. He also knew that a prodigy like Yi Guchen had the most distinguished status even among the 7 major forces. He was not someone a small stall owner like him could afford to offend. "Of course, I won't take advantage of you." Yi Guchen took back the token and threw the stone away. He left behind 10,000 crystal jades and took away the pitch-black wooden token and some miscellaneous items. The stall owner only stood up and wiped his sweat when Yi Guchen's figure was far away. The surrounding stall owners were also quite shocked. That was really dangerous. But what if that young master finds out that I'm selling useless things? The stall owner was still frightened. He looked at the cloth bag under his stall. There were actually some pitch-black wooden tokens inside. On them were engraved the numbers 3, 5, 8, and 9. Although these wooden tokens were indeed found by him from an elite disciple, he did not study the mystery behind them, so he could only put them out to cheat others. "It's better to leave." The stall owner directly packed up his stall and ran away. On the other side, Yi Guchen casually played with the pitch-black broken wooden token. But no matter how he probed, he could not make sense of it. This wooden token did not look like a spirit weapon, and there was no array fluctuation on it. It looked just like an ordinary rotten wooden token. Could it be that I really misjudged it? Yi Guchen could not help but shake his head. He put away the pitch-black wooden token. Anyway, even if he misjudged it, he would only lose 10,000 crystal jades. It was not a big deal to him. However, at this moment, the sound of a woman quarreling suddenly came from afar. Hearing this voice, Yi Guchen's eyes suddenly darkened. It was Mu Xingzu's voice. Chapter 278. In front of a stall, Mu Xingzu bit her cherry lips with her pearly white teeth, and a trace of anger appeared in her eyes. Opposite her, 3 women stood gracefully. The leader of the group was a woman in the middle. She was wearing a snow-white dress that could not hide her voluptuous figure, especially her ample bosom, which looked as though it would burst out of her clothes. That degree of fullness caused the passing cultivators to involuntarily cast their gazes over, secretly swallowing their saliva. However, facing so many burning gazes, not only was the woman not shy in the slightest, she instead proudly stuck out her full chest. That appearance gave off the feeling of being a wanton woman. At this moment, this woman was playing with a pendant in her jade-like hand. On the pendant hung a blue crystal that looked like a teardrop. This crystal was azure blue and deep. Besides its beautiful appearance, it did not have the slightest special fluctuation. Obviously, it was just an accessory. Just now, Mu Xingzu had taken a fancy to this pendant at a glance and wanted to buy it. They had already agreed on the price, but in the end, these 3 women walked over. The plump woman in the middle even directly snatched the pendant from Mu Xingzu's hands in a rude and unreasonable manner. "Miss, I've already agreed to sell my pendant to this little girl." Look. The stall owner could be considered to have some integrity, and at this moment, he was in a difficult position. "Oh, this pendant is so beautiful. Of course it has to be worn by someone who is worthy of it. Isn't selling it to her like a pearl hiding dust?" The plump woman glanced at Mu Xingzu's flat chest with disdain. Mu Xingzu was not old and was still in the stage of puberty, but her chest could be considered exquisite and pleasant. Of course, it could not be compared to this plump woman. Even among adult women, there were not many who were bigger than this plump woman. Mu Xingzu's face flushed red, and she was extremely embarrassed and angry. The laughter of some men could be faintly heard from the surroundings. Mu Xingzu gritted her teeth and took out the bronze token of the inner court. When this token that represented the inner court of the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas appeared, the laughter in the surroundings immediately dispersed, and some people could not help but exclaim softly. Even the stall owner was stunned as he recognized that this was the token of the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas. Looking at this token, the plump woman's face froze slightly, but in the next moment, she revealed a disdainful smile. When did the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas become so weak? Even the divine soul realm can enter the inner court. The plump woman shook her head and laughed. "That's right. He actually dares to take out this inner academy command token to embarrass himself. What a joke." The 2 ladies beside her also laughed in agreement. "Little girl, you're still too young if you want to suppress me with just an inner courtyard bronze token." After the voluptuous woman finished speaking, she waved her jade-like hand and took out a token. On the token, there were pictures of flowers and auspicious birds. In the middle of the token, there was the word, immortal. Of the celestial palace. This time, the crowd's Mu's forest celestial. Of the level divine celestial of her of the martial, of the celestial. A powerful pressure of the divine soul 5 transformations spread out, causing Mu Xingzu to take a few steps back. Her delicate face was incomparably pale. "Little girl, you have to know that there's always someone better than you. A mere Sword Sect's forest of pagodas doesn't have the qualifications to fight with me." The plump woman chuckled. Just as she was about to hang the crystal pendant around her neck, suddenly, a blood-red figure tore through the air, accompanied by a whistling fist, and directly smashed towards her plump chest. "Who is it?" The plump woman's face changed drastically. She also felt the power of the fist. Even with her divine soul 5 transformations cultivation, she still felt a little shocked. The plump woman's figure suddenly retreated, and she struck out with her palm, colliding with the fist. The plump woman's face suddenly turned pale. Her jade-like arm felt as if it was bearing a force of 10,000 pounds, and it made cracking sounds. In an instant, the blood-red figure stretched out a hand and directly snatched the crystal pendant from the plump woman's other hand, and then his figure suddenly retreated. This sudden scene was out of everyone's expectations. You're saying that a mere inner yard doesn't have the qualifications to fight with you? An indifferent voice sounded. Yi Guchen slowly walked over, and the blood cloud centipede returned to his side. He picked up the crystal pendant in the blood cloud centipede's hand. Senior brother Yi. Seeing this, Mu Xingzu's big eyes revealed a look of surprise. Yi Guchen smiled faintly, untied the necklace, and walked in front of Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu's little heart thumped. She was a little shy, and the corners of her mouth revealed a shy smile. Yi Guchen personally put the crystal pendant on Mu Xingzu's neck. Whether I'm worthy or not, it's not for others to say. It's for you to fight for it, Yi Guchen said indifferently. Xingzhu understands. Mu Xingzu nodded like a chick pecking rice, but the happiness in her heart was so strong that it could not be dispersed. Who are you? Do you know that I'm a disciple of the celestial palace of the consonant's divine palace? Not far away, the plump woman's face was ugly. She rubbed her sore and numb jade arm and looked at the blood cloud centipede with fear. I don't want to cause more trouble. If I leave now, I can pretend that nothing has happened, Yi Guchen said calmly. I'm a disciple of the celestial palace, Pan Shuelian. I wonder what your identity is? The plump woman named Pan Shuelian stared at Yi Guchen. If Yi Guchen didn't have any identity, then she didn't have to worry about anything. Hearing this, Yi Guchen sighed. He didn't say anything and took out the inner yard purple gold token. Although it was only a token, when it was taken out, the surrounding people were stunned. They didn't even have time to be shocked. Purple gold token. Pan Shuelian's delicate body involuntarily took 2 steps back. It was no surprise that she would have such a reaction. Although they were both inner yard tokens, purple gold and bronze tokens were 2 completely different concepts. Facing a bronze token, she could ignore it, but facing a disciple with a purple gold token, her attitude was a little ridiculous. Who are you? In the top 10 of the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas, there doesn't seem to be someone like you? Pan Shuelian stared at Yi Guchen's face. As an elite disciple of the Consonant's Palace, she naturally knew some of the geniuses of the 7 major forces. However, she didn't recognize the young man in front of her. I haven't been an inner yard disciple for long, Yi Guchen said calmly. Not long. Could it be? Yi Guchen. Pan Shuelian immediately reacted. When she shouted this sentence, the surrounding people who had already fallen into a daze opened their mouths even more. It was as if they were dreaming. The genius sword cultivator Yi Guchen, who had created a miracle in the 10 prefectures' elite assembly, had actually appeared in front of them. In an instant, gaze after gaze landed on Yi Guchen. Their gazes were filled with intense curiosity and respect. That's me, Yi Guchen said coldly. At this moment, even the expressions of the 2 girls beside Pan Shuelian changed. Extreme fear appeared on their faces. Putting aside Yi Guchen's current situation, he was a fierce person who dared to brandish his sword at a life and death chamber expert. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow. It was no wonder that they were afraid. However, after sensing Yi Guchen's aura, Pan Shuelian burst into laughter. TSK, who would have thought that the genius sword cultivator who killed Qin Aoshi and Xia Yubing in the elite assembly would be reduced to the point where he has to rely on a puppet for support. How lamentable. Although Pan Shuelian was afraid of the blood cloud centipede and didn't dare to casually attack Yi Guchen and the others. However, even if her words were disgusting, she still felt comfortable. After all, Pan Shuelian knew that it was impossible for her to take back the pendant from Mu Xingzu. At this moment, a beautiful figure in pink floated over from the other side of the street. When her gaze landed on Yi Guchen, it suddenly lit up. Young Master Yi. It's you. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. He didn't expect to meet an acquaintance here. Chapter 279. The beautiful figure in pink was a woman of exceptional beauty. She had an indifferent and elegant temperament. Her beautiful eyes were like autumn waters that made one's heart sway. It was the Zither fairy, who they had formed an alliance with in the Tianhuang Plain. I didn't expect to meet you here. You joined the Lingxi Palace? Yi Guchen smiled. Yi Guchen had a good impression of this elegant and gentle beauty. Of course, it was only between friends. Zither Fairy pursed her lips into a smile and nodded. She then turned to look at Pan Shuelyan. Her beautiful face turned cold. Zither Fairy, I forgot that you are related to the Sword Grandmaster. Seeing the arrival of the Zither Fairy, Pan Shuelyan's face darkened. It was obvious that the two of them did not see eye to eye in the Lingxi Palace. You better stay in the inn. Doing such a humiliating thing will only bring shame to the Lingxi Palace. The Zither Fairy's tone was cold. Let's go. Seeing that there was no chance left, Pan Shuelyan's beautiful eyes fiercely glanced at the few of them, puffed up her huge breasts, and turned to leave. It seems that your life in the Lingxi Palace has not been smooth sailing. Looking at Pan Shuelyan's back, Yi Guchen was confused. There will always be people like that. Coming to the sword territory of the void this time, she must be here to stop me from getting my fortune. The Zither Fairy shook her head and said helplessly, Your cultivation is in the third transformation of the divine soul? Yi Guchen raised an eyebrow. At the gathering of the elites, the Zither Fairy was only in the meditational level. Now she was in the third transformation. Such a cultivation speed was already extremely fast. Yes, I was recognized by the elders in the palace. I relied on many resources to reach this level. The Zither Fairy smiled. Then her clear eyes flashed as if she was thinking of something. She then said, Oh right, Mr. Yi, I have something to tell you. Oh, what is it? Yi Guchen was a little surprised. There are too many people here. Let's talk at night. The Zither Fairy lowered her voice and sounded a little mysterious. Mu Xingzu, who was playing with a crystal pendant, twitched her little white ears. She seemed to have heard something like, talk at night. She immediately turned her gaze to Zither Fairy, looking like a little hen protecting her eggs. When Fairy Zither noticed Mu Xingzu's gaze, she pursed her lips and smiled. Mu Xingzu saw the Zither Fairy's smile and lowered her head in embarrassment. At this moment, Yi Guchen's eyes suddenly narrowed. The origin ring on his finger flashed, and he took out a transmission jade slip. Brother Yi, are you near the market? Hurry over to the Eastern Market. Our inner court disciples are having a conflict with the sealed Saber King Palace. Chu Qingqi's voice came from the communication jade slip with a hint of anxiety. The Saber Sealing Monarch Hall? Yi Guchen put away the jade slip with a strange look in his eyes. He didn't have many interactions with the Saber-conferred Monarch Palace. The only time they met was when he killed Zhao Fengyang, a disciple of the Heavenly Saber List, at the sword-seeking stele of the Donglin Mansion. Although Yi Guchen didn't know much about the Saber-Sealing Monarch Hall, he knew that it was a pure saber cultivator organization that despised sword cultivators. Putting that aside, he was destined to have a showdown with the Saber-Sealing Monarch Hall's #1 on the Heavenly Saber ranking, Prime Sovereign Saber Maniac. So no matter what, it was best to understand the Saber-Sealing Monarch Hall's situation. Zither Fairy, I still have something to take care of here. I'll take my leave first. Yi Guchen cupped his fists. Is there something troublesome? If there's anything I can help with, we can go together, the Zither Fairy asked. Yi Guchen pondered for a moment and nodded without saying anything. Then Yi Guchen, Mu Xingzu, and the Zither Fairy headed to the Eastern Market. At this moment, the vendors in the middle of the Eastern Market had already removed their stalls, afraid that they would be caught in the crossfire. On both sides of the street, there were many onlookers gathered. After all, the friction and clash between two major forces was very attractive. In the middle of the street, Chu Qingqi's face was grave and a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Beside him, there were a few inner courtyard disciples who had collapsed on the ground. Their bodies were covered in blood, and their injuries weren't light. In addition, there were more than 10 inner court disciples who had rushed over. Their eyes were filled with anger as they glared at the group of people opposite them. Leading them were 2 young men in black. One of them was Zhou Yan, carrying a huge saber that was as heavy as the earth. The other was Yan Kuan, who was holding a lightsaber. Have gone too far. Chu Qingqi wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His cultivation had reached the second transformation of the Divine Soul realm. Although it wasn't very high, he wasn't someone who could be bullied by anyone. However, Both Zhou Yen and Yan Kuan were stronger than him in terms of cultivation realm. But what Chu Qingqi was most afraid of wasn't the two of them, but the red-clothed demonic man standing at the edge of the group of disciples. The man's face was as handsome as a demon, and he emitted a cold demonic aura that made people shudder. Previously, it was Zhou Yen and Yan Kuan who attacked. The red-clothed demonic man stood at the side and watched as if it had nothing to do with him. However, Chu Qingqi knew that the demonic man was the strongest among the disciples of the saber-conferred royal palace. It seems that your people haven't arrived yet. What a pity. Then I'll teach you a lesson first. I'd like to see if you still have the courage to enter the Void Sword realm after being seriously injured, Zhou Yen said playfully. Hearing Zhou Yan's words, the expressions of the inner court disciples, including Chu Qingqi, changed. The Void Sword realm was a great opportunity for sword cultivators like them. If they couldn't enter because of this, they would suffer a great loss. Damn it. If senior brother Bai Zichen and the others weren't so far away, you wouldn't have the chance to show off. An inner court disciple gritted his teeth. You're courting death. Yan Kuan's eyes turned cold as he unleashed his fourth transformation of the Divine Soul realm. He took a step forward and moved as fast as lightning. The great saber in his hand emitted a sharp saber radiance as he slashed at the inner court disciple's head. This speed was so fast that even Chu Qingqi was unable to react in time. The inner court disciple's face turned pale. He couldn't even react to the pressure of the fourth transformation of the Divine Soul realm. Just as the inner court disciple was in despair, a figure came between the two of them. The figure stretched out a palm that was overflowing with golden light and was about to clash with the great saber. Do you think my saber is made of wood? Yan Kuan sneered when he saw this. His true qi exploded and spiritual inscriptions radiated from the great saber. Clang. In the next moment, the great saber collided with the golden palm. The palm clenched its 5 fingers and held the great saber tightly. However, before the shock in Yan Kuan's eyes could rise, he heard a cracking sound. The palm had directly crushed the great saber. The palm that was holding the great saber turned over and slammed into Yan Kuan's chest. Yan Kuan was stunned for a moment. Before he could recover from the shock of his great saber being crushed, he was pushed back by the palm. The great saber fragments pierced his body and he spat out blood as he was sent flying. The saber-conferred monarch hall is as arrogant as usual. A young man clapped his hands and spoke with a cold voice. On the sealed Blade King Palace's side, the red-clothed demonic man, who acted as if this matter had nothing to do with him, walked from the edge to the center. Those slightly long and narrow demonic eyes stared at the young man in the middle of the field. You're the sword sex Yiguchen. Chapter 280. Along with the sinister voice of the red-clothed man, the surrounding onlookers were in an uproar. Their gazes all turned towards the calm youth in the black robe. Perhaps not everyone knew Yiguchen, but Yiguchen's name resounded like thunder in their ears. After all, Yiguchen had created all sorts of miracles during the 10 prefectures elite gathering. Yiguchen looked at the red-clothed demonic man, and a solemn look appeared in his eyes. He could sense the red-clothed man's deep and restrained aura. At the same time, his demonic aura made people feel very uncomfortable. The red-clothed man's strength was extraordinary. Yiguchen thought to himself, "Brother Yiguchen, you're finally here." Chu Qingqi walked to Yiguchen's side. "Are you guys all right?" Yiguchen asked when he saw the blood at the corner of Chu Qingqi's mouth. "I'm fine, but a few inner court disciples were seriously injured by Zhou Yen and Yan Kuan," Chu Qingqi said as he stared at the group from the saber-sealing monarch hall. Zhou Yen and Yan Kuan are both disciples on the heavenly saber list. One is ranked 7th, while the other is ranked 10th. However, they aren't the biggest threat. The biggest threat is the red-clothed man. He's ranked 3rd on the heavenly saber list, demonic saber Nieling. Chu Qingqi said solemnly. Demonic saber Nieling? Yiguchen turned to look at the demonic youth called Nieling, among the sky prides of the saber-sealing monarch hall. Besides the strongest and most famous saber maniac, there are 3 other sky prides known as 3 sabers, Chu Qingqi said coldly. 3 sabers? Yiguchen realized that he didn't know much about the saber's sealing monarch hall. Demonic saber Lengju, demonic saber Nieling, and blood saber Mo Juechen. Chu Qingqi said, Mo Juechen? Yiguchen raised his eyebrows as he recalled how he had cut off Mo Juechen's arm with the universal sacred sword. Of course, that was because Yiguchen had used a trick to resonate with the sword-seeking steel. That was how the sword-seeking steel had manifested the sacred sword of heaven and earth. Otherwise, Yiguchen would have been killed by Mo Juechen. The sword sex Yiguchen once killed Zhao Fengyang, a disciple of my heavenly saber list. Furthermore, he cut off one of Mo Juechen's arms. From the looks of it now, you are indeed crippled. Nieling looked at Yiguchen with his bewitching, narrow eyes. His gaze was like that of a venomous snake. It was very frightening. The saber-sealing monarch hall is truly domineering. Yiguchen's eyes were indifferent. Although he could sense the valiant aura surging around Nieling, he was still not afraid. Yiguchen, you have injured Yen Kun. Don't even think about leaving safely today. Zhou Yen shouted coldly. Yen Kun, who had taken the healing medicine and had his hand on his chest, also stared at Yiguchen viciously. He wouldn't have been hurt like this by Yiguchen's move if he hadn't been so shocked that he had lost his mind. But the most important thing was that Yiguchen had crushed his spiritual inscription weapon, the Tachi. The corner of Yen Kun's eyes twitched in disbelief when he saw Lin Yun's physical strength. Yiguchen, Nieling, have a good temper. I like to watch a show and not participate in it. But even if I don't make a move, it doesn't mean that others won't. For example, a playful smile rose on Nieling's lips. As soon as he finished speaking, a ferocious aura suddenly exploded from the street not far away. That fluctuation caused everyone in the surroundings to continuously retreat while their hearts trembled in fear. A one-armed youth in black slowly walked over. He only had one arm on his right hand and he was dragging a blood-red saber behind him. The saber scraped against the ground, causing sparks to fly and creating a trench. The gray-haired youth with a scar walked over step by step. With every step he took, his aura spread. Finally, the aura of his 6 transformations spread in all directions, bringing with it an extremely powerful and domineering pressure. The main character is here. Nieling retreated to the side as if he was waiting for a good show. Yiguchen? The gray-haired youth raised his eyes and stared at Yiguchen with cold, domineering, and murderous eyes. Blood saber? Mo Juechen? Yiguchen slowly clenched his fists and frowned. Not good. The hearts of the disciples of the Sword Sex Tower Forest, including Chu Qingqi, thumped. Blood saber Mo Juechen, demon saber Nieling, Zhou Yen, and the other top 10 disciples of the Heavenly Saber list. The Sword Sex Tower Forest was at an absolute disadvantage in this conflict. That day, you cut off one of my arms. I said that I would definitely take revenge. Today, I will use your life to repay my arm. Mo Juechen was a man of few words. If he could use his saber, he would try his best not to use his mouth. He held the sword burial saber in his right hand and directly slashed at Yiguchen. This attack was not something that Yen Kun's attack could compare to. It was on a completely different level. Even if Yiguchen used the invincible Vajrabody, he might not be able to block it with his bare hands. Moreover, Yiguchen's Sea of Qi had not been unsealed. Overall, it was still difficult for him to fight against Mo Juechen. However, at this moment, the sound of a zither suddenly spread out and blocked Mo Juechen's attack with a loud bang. The person who blocked it was Zither Fairy. Consonance Palace? Nieling raised his eyebrows slightly. Consonance Palace is actually helping Yiguchen? Alas, the dignified sword sect has fallen to the point of hiding behind a woman? Such discussions could be vaguely heard from the surroundings. Mo Juechen's expression did not change. He looked at the girl in pink who had stepped forward bravely, then turned to look at Yiguchen. The corners of his mouth curled up coldly. Yiguchen, back then, you used that shocking sword to cut off one of my arms. Now, you want to stand behind a woman? Yiguchen's expression was calm. He was not angered by the discussions. Young Master Yi, I believe that you will definitely recover your cultivation in the future. For now, you don't have to fight them head-on, Zither Fairy said calmly. Actually, you don't have to do anything. Yiguchen was very calm. He still had the blood cloud puppet. It was impossible for Emojuechen to take his life. Yiguchen, let's see how long you can hide. Emojuechen slashed his saber again. As the cultivation of the 6 transformations of the divine soul erupted, a blood-red saber light shot out horizontally. Such power caused Zither Fairy's expression to change drastically. Just as Yiguchen was about to use the blood cloud puppet, a green sword light flew over and directly collided with the blood-red saber light. That sword light, could it be Senior Brother by Zichen and the others? Many inner court disciples were excited when they saw this. 2 figures walked over from afar. The people of the titled Saber Monarch Hall are still so hot-tempered. The one who spoke was a man in green. His face was as clear as jade, and he held a green longsword in his hand. The aura around him had clearly reached the 7 transformations of the divine soul. It's actually him, the 9 profound sex green-clothed sword cultivator, Chen Yi. Chu Qingqi was rather surprised. Chen Yi was a rather famous genius of the sword Dao in the 9 profound sect. Although he was slightly inferior to Xian Hao, Yan Wushuang and the others, he wasn't too far off. Yiguchen was also a little surprised. He had never met Chen Yi before, so there was no reason for Chen Yi to help him. However, when Yiguchen's gaze turned to the person beside Chen Yi, he suddenly understood. That figure had the temperament of a scholar. He held a folding fan in his hand and had a tang saber at his waist. It was Bai Yinji. Brother Yiguchen, long time no see. Bai Yinji cupped his hands towards Yiguchen. With the arrival of the azure-clothed sword cultivator Chen Yi and Bai Yinji, the entire situation fell into a subtle state. Chapter 281. Emojuechen's expression sank when he saw the Consonance Divine Palace's Zither Fairy and the 9 profound sects Chen Yi getting involved. He could overlook the Zither Fairy and Bai Yinji, but he couldn't ignore Chen Yi. You sure have a lot of friends. Emojuechen's eyes were as cold as ice. Emojuechen always remembered the grudge of losing his arm. It was like a whip to him. He originally thought that he could kill Yiguchen, but he didn't expect this to happen. Tsk Diske. Emojuechen, it seems like you won't be able to kill Yiguchen today. Nieling shook his head and smiled. Another figure flew over from afar and shouted, Is the saber-sealing monarch hall so blind? How dare you humiliate the inner courtyard disciples when I'm not around? Ji Ling, who was dressed in a green robe, arrived. There was a trace of killing intent on her beautiful face as she looked coldly at the disciples of the saber-sealing monarch hall. Since Ji Ling was here, the dust had settled. Yiguchen heaved a sigh of relief. He wasn't afraid of Emojuechen, but it would expose his blood cloud centipede, which wasn't beneficial to him. As for Emojuechen, as long as Yiguchen could make a breakthrough, he wouldn't be afraid. Yiguchen, you're lucky today. Emojuechen couldn't wait to kill Yiguchen, but he knew that it was impossible. He turned around and left. At the same time, he said, I hope you'll still be so lucky after entering the Void Sword realm. After Emojuechen left, Nieling stretched his back and left as well. As for Zhou Yen and the others, they naturally didn't dare to stay any longer after seeing Blood Blade and Demon Blade leave. They left after shooting a cold glance at Yiguchen. Yiguchen frowned when he saw the disciples of the saber-sealing monarch hall leaving. It seemed like he had caused a lot of trouble. However, Yiguchen wasn't afraid of trouble. Yiguchen, it seems like Emojuechen is here to seek revenge. Do you need me to help you? Ji Ling's beautiful eyes flashed as she casually asked. Thank you for your kindness, senior sister. But it's no problem. I'll take care of it myself, Yiguchen said with a faint smile. Humph, back then, you were only able to cut off Emojuechen's arm by relying on the geographical advantage of the sword-seeking tablet. Now that he has come to seek revenge, don't you still need the help of others? Behind Ji Ling, Ting Jingshan and the rest had also rushed over. At this moment, they coldly mocked. Yiguchen shook his head. He didn't even seem to care. When you enter the Void Sword realm, let's see how you deal with it. Tang Jingshan's face turned cold. If there's nothing else, everyone should stay in the inn and wait for the opening of the Void Sword Realm. It won't do us any good if we encounter the Saber-Sealing King Palace or the Limitless Sword Sect. Ji Ling waved his hand and the surrounding inner court disciples responded in unison. Among the 7 major forces, the Saber-Sealing King Palace and the Limitless Sword Sect had the worst relationship with the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. Brother Yi, long time no see. Let's get together, Bai Yanji invited. Yi Guchen nodded slightly. After that, Yi Guchen, Mu Xingzu, Zither Fairy, Bai Yanji, Qin Yi, and the others had a small gathering in a restaurant. During this time, both Bai Yanji and Zither Fairy were tactful enough not to mention Su Jianshi. Obviously, in their eyes, Su Jianshi had suffered such a serious injury and was almost certain to die. Yi Guchen also understood in his heart, but he didn't say anything. No matter what price he had to pay, he had to save Su Jianshi. The first step to saving her was to increase his strength. Only then would he be qualified to enter the land of 5 elements and search for traces of the sacred elixir. After the small gathering, Yi Guchen and Mu Xingzu returned to the inn where the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest was located. It was night and the moonlight was cool. Yi Guchen sat cross-legged in his room to recover. At this time, there was a knock on the door. "Come in," Yi Guchen said. Dressed in pink, Zither Fairy walked in with light steps. Under the illumination of the candlelight in the room, Zither Fairy's fair face was covered with a layer of red, making her look charming. "Zither Fairy, can you tell me what it is now?" Yi Guchen smiled faintly. Zither Fairy nodded slightly and said seriously, "It's like this. A senior sister who has been to the Void Sword Realm told me that she accidentally found a secret cave residence. Although I don't know what the situation is, I don't think anyone has found it." An undiscovered cave? Yi Guchen's eyelids twitched. If so, it would be a great opportunity. But then Yi Guchen frowned and said, "Zither Fairy, although we have a good relationship, you have no reason to share such an opportunity with me, right?" Hearing this, Zither Fairy showed a touch of helplessness and said, "It's true, but this news was accidentally found out by Pan Shuelyan." "I see." Yi Guchen nodded slightly. With Pan Shuelyan's character, she will definitely not let go of this opportunity. Not to mention that her cultivation is higher than mine. If she enters the Void Sword Realm, she will definitely gather allies and plot against me together, leaving me with no way to escape. "So you found me and want me to ally with you to deal with Pan Shuelyan?" Yi Guchen said. "Yes, if Mr. Yi is willing to help, we can share the opportunity in the cave equally, as long as it is not taken away by Pan Shuelyan," Zither Fairy said sincerely. Although Zither Fairy was also very curious about the opportunity in the cave, she couldn't accept that Pan Shuelyan had obtained that opportunity. Otherwise, if Pan Shuelyan's strength increased, it would be difficult for Zither Fairy to stay in the Heavenly Immortal Palace. "Okay, it's not the first time we have formed an alliance." Yi Guchen agreed without hesitation. Moreover, he did not have a good impression of Pan Shuelyan. "Then it's a deal." Zither Fairy pursed her lips and smiled flirtatiously. Yi Guchen's face was still indifferent and there was no change in his expression. Looking at Yi Guchen's unmoved expression, even Zither Fairy could not help but feel annoyed. Could it be that she really did not have any charm? Then, Zither Fairy left. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. He knew that the Void Sword Realm would definitely be a fierce battle and there would be turbulent undercurrents. But no matter what, he had to achieve his goal. Then, Yi Guchen sat cross-legged and meditated again. It was a quiet night. The next day, when the light emitted by the Celestial Emperor's sword shone on the ground, Yi Guchen slowly opened his eyes. Because he felt that there was a violent space vibration coming from the floating mountain far away, accompanied by thunderous roars. Even though the 100-Break City was still a distance away from the floating mountain, it was still thunderous and caused the city walls of the 100-Break City to tremble. Disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, listen up. The Void Sword Realm is about to open and the opportunity that belongs to you has arrived. Don't lose the momentum of a sword cultivator. Elder Qing He's loud voice came from the inn. "Yes, sir." Along with numerous loud shouts, strands of aura tore through the sky like the sharpness of swords. Numerous figures flashed out explosively from within the inn, and all of them were the elites of the inner court of the sword sect's forest of pagodas. At the same time, in the encampments of the other forces in the 100-break city, there were also densely packed auras that soared into the sky. Some of the auras were as overbearing as a wild blade, while others were as unpredictable as an abyss. Many elites and geniuses from the 7 forces rushed to the floating mountain. This was not only a fight for the opportunity, but also a fight between the geniuses from the 7 forces. It was a fight between the elites. Even with Yi Guchen's cold and indifferent temperament, at this moment, a flame was gradually ignited in his black eyes. The wind and clouds transformed into a dragon, waiting for this moment. Chapter 282. The floating mountain was the base of the Void Sword sect in ancient times. Around the floating mountain, the space vibrated and an independent space world was hidden inside. Although the area was not particularly large, it was several times larger than the swordsmanship-seeking mountain range. Usually, when the Void Sword realm was not open, the floating mountain was quiet and there were few people. But today, around the floating mountain, the sound of wind breaking could be heard one after another. Figures landed around the floating mountain like locusts passing by. Gazes after gazes looked towards the floating mountain that was hidden within the clouds. Their eyes were filled with an extremely heated expression. The Void Sword realm only opened once a year. Every time it opened, there would be disciples of the 7 major forces who would obtain unimaginable and amazing opportunities, such as top-level mystical rune weapons, sage-to-be medicines, or the inheritance of some expert. For sword cultivators, the Void Sword realm was a place of extraordinary significance, because Xian Hao, the genius of the Limitless Sword sect, had obtained a peerless Void Sword essence from it. For sword cultivators, this kind of opportunity was even more valuable than those mystical rune weapons, sage-to-be medicines, and so on. Therefore, there were also some sword cultivators who wanted to obtain the sword essence inheritance from it. However, that kind of opportunity was rarer than other opportunities. Not long after, Yiguchen and the other disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest also rushed to the vicinity of the floating mountain. Yiguchen raised his head and looked over. The floating mountain stood tall and majestic, exuding a sense of majesty. Especially the surrounding clouds and mist, which covered the lower half of the mountain. It looked as if the mountain was suspended in the void. That was how the floating mountain got its name. However, what caught Yiguchen's attention the most was that the space around the floating mountain was vibrating like water waves. Every time it vibrated, a small world seemed to be hidden in it. Brother Yi, there is one thing I have to tell you. When the space around the floating mountain is vibrating most violently, the entrance to the Void Sword realm will appear. However, it will only be for a short time and then it will close. So, pay attention to the timing of entering, Chu Qingqi said. If that's the case, then what about getting out? Yiguchen's eyes flashed. He really didn't know much about this. If we leave, it will take about a month. In the center of the Void Sword realm, there is a transmitting formation. A month later, the formation will automatically generate spatial fluctuations and tear the void apart. That is when we leave. However, it will only last for a short while. If we miss this opportunity, we may be trapped in it for about a year. Chu Qingqi's tone was slightly serious. Oh, in that case, if the spiritual qi in the Void Sword realm is abundant, why not stay there for a year? Yiguchen raised his eyebrows. Brother Yi, you may not know this, but when the Nether Sword realm is completely closed, all the dangerous formations will be fully activated, and some powerful demonic beasts hidden deep within will also appear. Therefore, if you are left inside, even if you are a hidden latch of life and death or a spiritual bridge of heaven and earth expert, you may not have a chance to survive. Chu Qingqi's words were heavy. I see. Yiguchen nodded slightly. It seemed that the Void Sword realm was not a good place. Just as Yiguchen was thinking, the divine condor flapped its wings and landed beside him. Yiguchen would not restrict the divine condor's freedom, nor did he ask where it had gone. I feel that this treasure land is a great opportunity for me, the divine condor said mysteriously. Is that so? Yiguchen found it funny. As time passed, the spatial fluctuations around the floating mountain became more and more violent. Some of the heaven's prides of the seven forces also appeared one after another. The people of the three imperial palaces are here. That's little flame Emperor Jian. Suddenly, many warriors in the surroundings exclaimed in low voices. Obviously, they had seen some incredible heaven's prides. Yiguchen also looked over and saw a young man in the lead among the disciples of the three imperial palaces. He was dressed in a fiery red robe and had short crimson-red hair that looked like it was spurting flames. The most peculiar thing was that his eyes were a crimson crystalline color, which made people feel a burning sensation when they looked at him. It's one of the three little emperors of the three imperial palaces, Little Flame Emperor Jian. The three heavens prides of the three imperial palaces were all taught by their three palace masters. Their strength is extraordinary, but the other two heavens prides don't seem to have come, Chu Qingqi said. Yiguchen nodded inwardly. The three palace masters of the three imperial palaces were all experts of the divine dwelling king stage. In terms of foundation, they were not much inferior to the limitless sword sect. And Yiguchen could tell from Ji Yan's aura that he was at least a heaven's pride of the sixth transformation of the divine spirit. The people of the nine profound sect are here. Another group of people arrived, led by the azure-clothed sword cultivators Qin Yi and Bai Yanji. Because of Bai Yanji, Yiguchen and Qin Yi had some interactions, which could be considered as forming good karma. Qin Yi and Bai Yanji looked at Yiguchen and nodded with a faint smile. Yiguchen returned the greeting. Soon after, another group of dazzling figures appeared. It was a group of extremely charming women. Every single one of them was charming and alluring, delicate and exquisite, causing the gazes of the majority of the cultivators present to converge towards them. Among this group of people, the most conspicuous were naturally Pan Shuelyen and Zither Fairy, who were standing at the front. There was no need to mention Zither Fairy. Her beauty was on par with Situ Hongxue in the Saint Origin Empire, and her popularity had always been very high. Pan Shuelyen, on the other hand, attracted everyone's attention purely with her enchanting posture. In particular, her ample bosom swayed up and down as she moved her feet, which was extremely attractive. Zither Fairy looked at Yiguchen and nodded with a smile, but a glimmer of light flashed in the depths of her crystal-like eyes. Yiguchen naturally understood the meaning behind it. He had already exchanged communication jade slips with Zither Fairy, and they would join hands when the time came. On the other side, Pan Shuelyen's beautiful eyes coldly glanced at Yiguchen and Mu Xingzu, and then turned to look at Zither Fairy. The corner of her mouth lifted into a sarcastic smile, and said, Zither Fairy, now that Yiguchen's true chi has been crippled, he's no different from a cripple. What's the benefit of being on good terms with him? Pan Shuelyen did not lower her voice, so everyone present could hear it. Soon after, many different gazes were thrown at Yiguchen. There were various meanings in their gazes. Yiguchen's expression was still indifferent. He had long been used to such strange gazes. Pan Shuelyen, the relationship between people is not only about cooperation and exploitation. Not everyone is as snobbish as you. Zither Fairy said indifferently. Pretentious white lotus. Pan Shuelyen rolled her eyes, looking extremely disdainful. She already had a plan in mind. This time, the Void Sword realm would definitely make Zither Fairy suffer. Just as these people arrived, powerful auras swept over from afar. The degree of concentration indicated that it wasn't just one force, but several forces had arrived at the same time. Looking at the several forces that came, Yiguchen's black eyes flickered with an extremely sharp cold light. These forces all had enmity with him. Chapter 283. In the southeast direction, a group of black-clothed cultivators with sabers rushed over. Other than Demon Blade Nyeling and Blood Blade Mo Juechen, there was also someone Yiguchen was familiar with. The brawny man carried a saber that was as tall as a person on his back. His aura was imposing and extraordinary. He was the great desolate mansion's Shinto clan's genius, blade maniac Shinta Miao, who had joined forces with Xia Yubing and the others to hunt him down in the infinite plains. Yiguchen observed Shinta Miao's aura and realized that he had also reached the third transformation of the Divine Soul realm. When the group from the sealed Saber Monarch Palace arrived, two groups of people also arrived from two other directions. One of the groups was a group of young men and women who were dressed rather luxuriously. All of them had an innate noble aura. That aura didn't come from their strength, but from their identity. They're from the Saint Origin Academy. Some cultivators whispered. The Saint Origin Academy was backed by the Saint Origin dynasty's imperial family. Therefore, most of the people in the academy were princes, princesses, and young marquises. Yiguchen also saw a familiar face among the group from the Saint Origin Academy. He was Crown Prince Yuni, who was dressed in luxurious golden robes and had a faint arrogance and superior aura. However, when Crown Prince Yuni looked at Yiguchen, the arrogance in his eyes instantly turned into fear and resentment. He had schemed against Yiguchen many times in the infinite plains. He had lured Qin Aoshi and Yiguchen into a bloody battle and later joined forces with Xia Yubing, Shinta Miao, and Murong Ditian to kill Yiguchen. Regardless of Yiguchen's current strength, the shadow he had cast on Crown Prince Yuni wouldn't fade away for a long time. Yiguchen had also noticed Crown Prince Yuni. On the other side, Yuan Mia looked at Crown Prince Yuni with an extremely cold gaze. However, what caught Yiguchen's attention the most wasn't Crown Prince Yuni, but the young man in black and gold armor standing beside him. The young man also held a black and gold spear in his hand. His aura was even more powerful than Prince Yuni's. Chu Qingqi noticed Yiguchen's gaze and couldn't help but say, "That young man is young Ho Fengshan from Saint Origin Academy. He is also a heaven's proud son with the 7 transformations of Divine Soul." Oh, it seems that this Void Sword realm is indeed full of hidden talents. Yiguchen smiled faintly. The young Marquis Feng Qin, the little flame Emperor Ji Yen, and the azure-clothed sword cultivator Qin Yi. Normally, it would be difficult to see even one of these geniuses, but now, all of them had gathered together. However, what caused Yiguchen's expression to darken the most was not these two groups of people, but the figures that had arrived on their swords. They were all wearing black and white Taoist robes. Every single one of their auras was like a sword that soared into the sky, bringing with it a sharp glint that would draw the attention of others. The one with the deepest enmity with the sword sect Talon wasn't the saber-sealing Monarch Hall, but the Limitless Sword Sect. The weakest of the Limitless Sword Sect's disciples was at the Divine Soul realm. Among them, Yiguchen also saw some familiar figures, such as Xian Ying, Murong Ditian, and the others. Xian Ying could be said to be domineering during the elite battle of the Infinite Plains. However, with his second transformation of Divine Soul realm cultivation, he could only stay at the back of the group. In addition, what surprised Yiguchen was Murong Ditian's aura. Murong Ditian's aura had also faintly reached the third transformation of Divine Soul realm. Just as Yiguchen looked over, Murong Ditian also looked over. His sword-like eyebrows immediately knitted together. After snatching the immemorial sword token and taking away Sidu Hongxue, Yiguchen and Murong Ditian were already irreconcilable enemies. This brat is actually still alive. Murong Ditian's face darkened. He originally thought that Yiguchen wouldn't have many days left after being poisoned by the Soul Star spirit-devouring worm. However, in the end, he still appeared in front of him as if nothing had happened. However, what made Murong Ditian's lips curl into a cold smile was that he indeed didn't feel a trace of true qi from Yiguchen's body. It was obvious that in his eyes, even if Yiguchen wasn't dead, he was no different from a cripple. You have lost your cultivation and still dare to come to the Void Sword realm. This place will be your burial ground. Murong Ditian's face darkened as he said coldly in his heart. Yiguchen's eyes were deep as he naturally knew what Murong Ditian was thinking. However, the one that made Yiguchen fearful wasn't Murong Ditian. Instead, it was the man who stood at the front of the Limitless Sword Sect's Sun Moon Hall's disciples. The man had long black and white hair that fluttered in the wind. His expression was incomparably indifferent. Even though the 7 great forces had gathered and many geniuses had gathered, he didn't seem to care at all. He looked as if he didn't care at all as he looked at the floating mountain indifferently. It was as if no one could stop his footsteps. He is. Yi Guchen's brows were tightly knitted. Although they had never met before, Yi Guchen could vaguely guess the man's identity. Damn it, it's Xian Hao. Xian Hao, why is he here? He has already been here a few times. Over at the Sword Sect's Tower Forest side, all the disciples' faces darkened. Even Bai Zichen, Jiling, and the other top 5 geniuses had grave and fearful expressions. This Xian Hao's cultivation. Divine Soul 9 transformations. Yi Guchen stared at Xian Hao. Divine Soul 9 transformations, this was the highest realm among the 7 major forces heaven's prides. The next step would be the life and death chamber. If one could really reach the life and death chamber at such a young age, not to mention the Saint Origin dynasty, even the entire South Sky region's heaven's prides would have a place. However, the life and death chamber required great luck and comprehension. It was also because of this that Xian Hao, Yan Wushuang and the others were stuck at this realm. Even so, Xian Hao and the others were still firmly standing at the peak of the 7 major forces heaven's prides. Compared to him, Ji Yan, Fong Qin, Qin Yi and the others were much dimmer. With Xian Hao's arrival, not to mention the Sword Sect's Tower Forest, even the other forces' atmosphere became heavy. Whether it was Little Flame Emperor Ji Yan, Fiend Blade Nieling, Young Marquis Fong Qin, or even the green-clothed sword cultivator Qin Yi, they all stared at Xian Hao, feeling as if a huge rock was pressing down on their chests. With Xian Hao's cultivation, I'm afraid that only the Little War Emperor can contend with him. Ji Yan thought inwardly. The Little War Emperor he mentioned was naturally the leader of the 3 little kings, the strongest heaven's pride of the 3 palaces. Only prime sovereigns can deal with this person. Fiend Blade Nieling's gaze turned solemn. The Blade Sealing King Palace despised all sword cultivators, so they naturally didn't have a good impression of the limitless sword sect. After Xian Hao's arrival, the entire clamorous floating mountain seemed to fall silent, as if it had fallen into a vague pressure. Is this the deterrence of a top heaven's pride? Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Yi Guchen couldn't help but smile faintly. He didn't feel any pressure. As long as he could break the seal and make a breakthrough, Yi Guchen wouldn't be any weaker than Xian Hao and the others. Rumble. Amidst this silent weight, the clouds around the floating mountains surged like waves. The vibrating void also seemed to tremble violently, like a calm lake that had a huge rock thrown into it, causing ripples to appear. Boom! There was another explosion in the void. Many distortions appeared in the space around the floating mountain, like the entrance to a vortex. One could faintly see another small world inside. Brother Yi, now is the time. Chu Qingqi shouted. As soon as the whirlpool entrances appeared, all the heaven's prides and elite disciples of the 7 forces rushed towards the whirlpool entrances. The battle of the Void Sword Realm had officially begun. Chapter 284. This was an incomparably ancient land. There were mountains, rivers, and many dilapidated palaces scattered across the land. Although it had been covered in dust for a long time, one could vaguely see its former glory and magnificence. Following the distortion of the surrounding space, many figures suddenly flashed and appeared from the entrance of the whirlpool in this originally quiet land. They landed in different places. Because of the uncertainty of the entrance of the whirlpool, everyone who entered didn't know where they would land. If they happened to land in a killing array or a desperate situation, they could only admit that they were unlucky. A beautiful figure in green clothes suddenly emerged from the entrance of a whirlpool. She had bright eyes and white teeth, and was pretty and cute. It was Mu Xingzu. She and Yi Guchen had entered the same whirlpool entrance, but when they came out, they were scattered all over the place. Were actually scattered. However, Xingzhu can't drag senior brother Yi down. I'll work hard on my own first and look for opportunities. Mu Xingzu cheered herself on. However, at this moment, a ghost-like blue figure floated past in the distance. What's that? Mu Xingzu's heart suddenly felt a chill. She was the only one around here, and the surroundings were very quiet. However, Mu Xingzu's body was almost covered in goosebumps. There was no one around, but she seemed to feel that there was a gaze quietly watching her in the dark. "Who is it? Who is it? Come out quickly." Mu Xingzu's silver teeth chattered and trembled. There was a trace of fear in her misty eyes. Even if a monster appeared, Mu Xingzu wouldn't be so afraid. However, no woman could have the courage to face this kind of strange atmosphere. At this moment, a ghost-like blue figure flashed past in the distance again like a ghost. "There's a ghost!" Mu Xingzu couldn't bear it anymore. She directly flew away, and her real qi surged. She quickly left this place. However, the panicked Mu Xingzu did not notice that the blue crystal pendant around her neck had a faint cold light. After Mu Xingzu left, that ghost-like figure seemed to be chanting in the dark. 8,000 years since the Blue Bridge of Broken Love, Jun Wen's return has yet to be determined. In another part of the Void Sword realm, a vortex entrance was vibrating in the void. After that, a dark-robed young man appeared. It was Yiguchen. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth here is indeed different from that of the outside world. Yiguchen surveyed the vast and ancient land. Although it looked a little desolate, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth here was much denser than the outside world. 1 day of cultivation in the Void Sword realm was equivalent to 5 days in the outside world. Of course, the reason for such a difference in spiritual qi was that the Void Sword realm was a small world independent of the outside world. It would only open once a year due to space vibrations, so the spiritual qi of heaven and earth here was denser than the outside world. Let's take a look around and roughly understand the situation. Yiguchen was not in a hurry to look for opportunities, because there was a whole month's time. Compared to looking for opportunities, it was more important to understand the situation here first. After thinking about it, Yiguchen moved his feet and dashed into the distance. As Yiguchen moved, he also came across some dilapidated palaces and pavilions. However, after searching them, he did not find anything valuable. It was obvious that after so many openings, the obvious opportunities had all been taken away. Could it be that I can only gain something in the pill hall of the Sword Pavilion? Yiguchen could not help but think. At this moment, a shadow covered the sky, accompanied by the sound of wings flapping. Brother Condor? Yiguchen looked over and saw that it was the Divine Condor. "Gee, I found you, little Yi." The Divine Condor flew down. "How did Brother Condor know that I am here?" Yiguchen asked. The Void Sword realm covered a vast area. Without a communication jade slip, it was difficult to find the other party immediately. Grandpa Condor's nose is very sensitive. The Divine Condor put its wings on its waist and said proudly, "Is that so?" Yiguchen was a little speechless. But then, Yiguchen and the Divine Condor went on their way. Because they had been together for so long, the Divine Condor reluctantly allowed Yiguchen to sit on its back. Sitting on the Divine Eagle, Yiguchen soared into the sky and could see the land around him. At this moment, Yiguchen suddenly sensed an extremely shocking demonic qi surging in a mountain range in the distance. The vigorous demonic qi fluctuation made Yiguchen slightly shocked. However, what made Yiguchen focus was that the demonic qi fluctuation did not seem to belong to a living demonic beast. It was more like some kind of remnant pressure. Opportunity, it's an opportunity. Boy Yi, Grandpa Condor's opportunity is here. Sensing the demonic qi, the Divine Condor's eyes immediately turned red. Like a cat that smelled meat, it flew directly towards the source of the demonic qi fluctuation. "Brother Condor, you'd better be careful." Yiguchen frowned, because he vaguely sensed that there were many ferocious auras hibernating in the mountain range. As Yiguchen and the Divine Condor approached the mountain range, Yiguchen also saw that at the entrance of the mountain range, there was an ancient broken stone tablet with the words, "Demonic Beast Garden" carved on it. Is this mountain range where the Void Sword sect kept demonic beasts in ancient times? Yiguchen guessed. Just as the Divine Condor flew into the mountain range, a giant snake covered in blood-red scales suddenly burst out from the dense forest below. It opened its bloodthirsty fangs and bit at the Divine Condor. "You're courting death." The Divine Condor's eyes turned red. Eagle-type demonic beasts were supposed to be the nemesis of snake-type demonic beasts, but this blood-red giant snake seemed to be unusually ferocious and fearless. The divine condor stretched out its hook-like claws and directly grabbed the blood-red giant snake's head. With a crack, it pierced into the snake's head. The divine condor stretched out its sharp beak and pecked the blood-red giant snake's head open. Blood splattered everywhere. Brother Condor is really fierce. Yiguchen was also speechless. The divine condor's eyes were blood-red. At this moment, it was as if it had entered battle mode. No difficulty could stop it from going to the place where the demonic chi gathered. However, as the divine condor went deeper into the mountain range, the demonic beasts that appeared were also stronger. Not to mention rank 3 demonic beasts, there were even a few rank 4 demonic beasts. And because of the rich spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the Void Sword realm, the strength and combat strength of these demonic beasts were also slightly higher than those of the outside world. However, Yiguchen finally saw how powerful the divine condor was when it went all out. Even rank 4 demonic beasts of the same level as it could hardly resist a few rounds. Now, Yiguchen completely believed that the divine condor was indeed not an ordinary divine condor. Its combat strength was extraordinarily strong. And under such a fierce battle, Yiguchen and the divine condor were finally about to reach the place where the demonic chi was oppressive. Yiguchen suddenly felt that the 5-colored golden core in his dantian had started to tremble again. Could it be? Yiguchen's eyes revealed a hint of surprise. The last time the 5-colored golden core trembled was when it encountered the black dragon python with a trace of the dragon clan's bloodline in the Venerable's cave. It was also because it absorbed the black dragon python's blood essence and demonic soul that Yiguchen was able to activate the wood azure dragon totem. Could it be the same this time? Yiguchen was slightly excited. However, at this moment, a majestic demonic chi suddenly exploded in the mountain range, accompanied by a loud roar. Rank 5 demonic beast. The divine condor and Yiguchen were both shocked. Chapter 285. Ordinary 5th-rank demonic beasts were already as powerful as life and death chamber experts. As for peak 5th-rank demonic beasts, they were as powerful as heaven and earth spiritual bridge experts. Yiguchen and the divine condor looked over and saw a ferocious tiger that was 10 feet long and 10 feet tall rushing out of the mountains. There were feathered wings on both sides of the tiger's ribs. As its wings flapped, the tiger soared into the sky. Demonic chi burst out as it pounced on Yiguchen and the divine condor. It's a flying feather tiger. Yiguchen's eyes narrowed. This demonic beast not only had the terrifying strength of a tiger, but also could fly and burrow into the ground. It was extremely ferocious. Although it was only an ordinary 5th-rank demonic beast, it was still as powerful as life and death chamber experts. Yiguchen and the divine condor were no match for it. Gosh, I can't deal with this tiger. The divine condor screamed like a girl being stared at by a pervert. The flying feather tiger opened its mouth and roared. This was not just a simple threat. The powerful sound waves spread out like transparent ripples. Yiguchen and the divine condor felt dizzy, as if thunder and lightning were roaring in their heads. Some high-level demonic beasts or beasts with bloodlines had demonic beast super skills. Obviously, this was not an ordinary roar. It was one of the flying feather tiger's super skills, Sky Tiger Sound Wave. Seeing Yiguchen and the divine condor in a daze, the flying feather tiger flapped its wings and slapped out with its tiger claws, tearing through the air. That ferocious strength, coupled with the tiger claws that were as sharp as divine weapons, made it difficult for even a genius in the 9 transformations of divine soul to withstand one attack. Yiguchen bit the tip of his tongue and forced himself to wake up. His origin ring flashed as he took out the blood cloud centipede. A bloody shadow flashed as the blood cloud centipede's fist collided with the flying feather tiger's claw, causing a violent explosion. The surrounding air turned into ripples, shaking the surroundings. The flying feather tiger roared in pain and was sent flying. The blood cloud centipede is indeed extraordinary. Yiguchen exhaled softly. However, even though the blood cloud centipede had blocked the flying feather tiger's attack, Yiguchen could sense that the demonic cloud blood crystal behind the blood cloud centipede's head had lost some of its energy. Previously, when Yiguchen used the blood cloud puppet, he limited it to the strength of the divine soul fifth transformation. Therefore, the consumption of the demon cloud blood crystal's energy was very small. But this time, in order to fight against the flying feather tiger, Yiguchen had directly raised the power of the blood cloud puppet to the life and death threshold. Naturally, the consumption of the demonic cloud blood crystal was even greater. Right now, my strength has yet to recover. The blood cloud centipede is a layer of protection. I can't use up all the power of the demonic cloud blood crystal. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. If the devil cloud blood crystal's energy ran out, then the blood cloud centipede would only be a decoration. I can't delay any longer. I have to kill that flying feather tiger immediately. Yiguchen's eyes were resolute. He directly urged the blood cloud centipede. Receiving the order, the blood cloud centipede pounced on the flying feather tiger. Each of its punches contained a power that even life and death threshold experts would be wary of. Boom, boom, boom. After a round of fighting, the flying feather tiger was directly smashed to death by the blood cloud centipede's fists. Of course, the demonic cloud blood crystal's energy had also been greatly consumed. It was almost the same as the total amount of energy it had consumed before. Damn it. Fortunately, little Yi has this puppet. The divine condor landed with Yiguchen on its back. With a peck of its sharp beak, it directly pecked out the demonic core of the flying feather tiger and swallowed it. This is the demonic core of a 5th-rank demonic beast. Brother Condor, you can actually swallow it directly? Yiguchen was astonished. Kaka, Grandpa Condor's bloodline is not for show. The divine condor smiled proudly. Then, they set off again, flying toward the deepest part of the mountain range. Along the way, they encountered another 2 5th-rank demonic beasts. They were both killed by the blood cloud centipede. The demonic core was swallowed by the divine condor. As for the demonic cloud blood crystal in the blood cloud centipede's brain, almost half of its energy had been consumed. No wonder not many people enter this place. These 5th-rank demonic beasts, which are comparable to the hidden latch of life and death, are enough to block everyone. Yiguchen sighed inwardly. Then, they finally entered the deepest part of the mountain range and saw the place where the demonic aura was fluctuating. It was a mountain valley. In the mountain valley, flames and flames soared into the sky, bringing with them an extremely hot aura. The entire mountain valley was burning with flames. In the flames, the remains of a huge demonic beast could be vaguely seen. Although it had been worn down by time, the vigorous demonic aura and flames were still burning. That's the pressure of a 7th-rank demonic beast. Yiguchen was momentarily stunned. The divine condor's eyes were blood red, and he couldn't stop panting. Judging from the pressure of this skeleton, it was indeed the remains of a 7th-rank demonic beast. A 7th-rank demonic beast was a powerful existence comparable to a human venerable in the heavenly palace realm. There is a 7th-rank demonic beast. It seems that the Void Sword faction in ancient times is indeed not comparable to the 7 superpowers. Yiguchen suppressed his surprise and couldn't help but stare. Although only the skeleton was left, the unique aura of the demonic beast couldn't be dissipated. It's a 7th-rank demonic beast, the Heavenly Fire Divine Sparrow. I'm rich, I'm rich. This Heavenly Fire Divine Sparrow has a trace of the vermilion bird's bloodline. It's very beneficial to me. The divine condor flapped his wings excitedly and couldn't stop laughing. As Yiguchen approached the remains of the Heavenly Fire Divine Sparrow, the 5-color golden core in his body trembled even more violently. Then, in the 5-color golden core, the area where the vermilion bird's totem was carved suddenly lit up with a red light. The red light emitted from Yiguchen's body and directly covered the remains of the Heavenly Fire Divine Sparrow. It's here again. Yiguchen stared carefully. This was the second time the 5-color golden core had such a strange change. Just as the red light covered the remains of the Heavenly Fire Divine Sparrow, Yiguchen seemed to hear a loud and clear cry. Then, an illusory demonic soul that was burning with red flames was directly extracted. It's the demonic soul of the heavenly fire divine sparrow. Yi Guchen's eyes narrowed. How is this possible? Little Yi, how can you extract a demonic soul? The divine condor was also extremely surprised. As a 7th-rank demonic beast, the demonic soul of the heavenly fire divine sparrow was obviously several times stronger than that of the black dragon python. Moreover, the vermilion bird's bloodline in its body was far superior to the green dragon's bloodline in the black dragon python's body. However, no matter how hard the demonic soul of the heavenly fire divine sparrow struggled, it couldn't get rid of the red light emitted by the 5-color golden core. In the end, it was directly sucked in. As the demonic soul was sucked into the 5-color golden core, the golden core became extremely hot. Yi Guchen's skin suddenly became extremely hot, as if he was being roasted in a furnace. He hurriedly sat down cross-legged, calmed his mind, and performed the indestructible body of Vajra at the same time. The 5-color golden core in his dantian spun, emitting rays of red light. Yi Guchen, who was sitting cross-legged, could feel the scorching fire element in the heavens and earth. Could it be that I can use this to comprehend the fire essence realm? Yi Guchen was a little surprised. Grandpa Condor is also going to look for the blood essence. The divine condor directly entered the remains of the heavenly fire divine sparrow to search for the blood essence to refine. Just as the man and the condor were digesting their own opportunities, outside the mountain range, a genius who was emitting a scorching aura appeared. He stared into the depths of the mountain range with a trace of surprise in his eyes. The aura of those demonic beasts is gone. Who killed them? Or did they leave? No matter what, I have to go in and take a look. I can feel the aura. It's the aura of a powerful fire seed. The young man who spoke was wearing a red robe and had a head of red short hair. He was the little flame emperor of the 3 imperial palaces, Jiyan. Chapter 286. Within the call, flames soared into the sky. Even though the heavenly fire divine sparrow had been dead for a long time, the flames were still blazing. The heavenly fire divine sparrow had a trace of the vermilion bird bloodline, and its body contained the vermilion bird divine fire. This divine fire was comparable to the special fire of heaven and earth, and was extraordinarily hot. Yi Guchen sat cross-legged beside the call, closing his eyes and comprehending. When the heavenly fire divine sparrow's demonic soul was absorbed into the 5-colored golden core, Yi Guchen's mind suddenly became more sensitive to the fire element. In his perception, this fiery mountain valley had almost turned into countless dense fire elemental light spots. The Tao of fire, formless, violent, swift. Yi Guchen was comprehending. Although the 5-colored golden core had absorbed the black dragon python's demonic soul, the black dragon python's quality was clearly not enough for Yi Guchen to comprehend the Tao of wood. But now, after absorbing the rank 7 demonic soul, Yi Guchen's understanding of fire was extremely clear. Gradually, Yi Guchen felt a burning sensation in his chest. It was as if a piece of red-hot iron was stuck to his chest. This burning pain was unbearable for an ordinary person. But Yi Guchen did not seem to hear it, and sat cross-legged in meditation. With his temperament, this level of pain was almost negligible. Finally, the 5-colored golden core in Yi Guchen's dantian trembled violently, releasing a strange, blazing energy. This power converged on Yi Guchen's chest, and gradually manifested into a crimson totem. It was the vermilion bird totem. And Yi Guchen could clearly feel that the vermilion bird totem's power was more powerful than the azure dragon totem on his left arm. This did not mean that the vermilion bird totem was more powerful than the azure dragon totem, but that the black dragon python's demonic soul alone could not fully condense the azure dragon totem. Although the vermilion bird totem's power was not fully condensed, it was clearly more powerful than the azure dragon totem. Yi Guchen tried to activate the vermilion bird totem's power. In the next instant, the vermilion bird totem on Yi Guchen's chest suddenly erupted with a crimson light. Yi Guchen immediately felt the power of the totem spreading out and gathering behind him. As an extremely hot feeling spread out, A pair of fire wings condensed by the power of the totem appeared behind Yi Guchen's back. This pair of fiery wings was extremely beautiful. They burned with burning flames, just like the wings of a vermilion bird. As they flapped slowly, an extremely hot aura spread out. This is the wings of the vermilion bird. Yi Guchen had never thought that he would really be able to use the power of totems. Of course, Yi Guchen was able to use the power of the totem largely because of the 5-colored golden core in his body. The Azure Dragon totem gave me the Azure Dragon claw, and the Vermilion Bird totem gave me the Vermilion Bird wings. I think the other totems also have their own uses. Moreover, these totems can also help me comprehend their own concepts. If I fuse them with my sword essence, maybe I can use the 5-colored totems to comprehend the 5 elements sword essence. Yi Guchen's eyes shone brightly. Both the Azure Dragon totem and the Vermilion Bird totem were supreme totems that represented one of the 5 elements Tao. If Yi Guchen could comprehend their concepts and fuse them with his sword essence, he might be able to comprehend the 5 elements sword essence. If the 5 elements were separated, a single sword essence, such as Yu Shicho's water sword essence, could only be considered an ordinary sword essence. However, if the 5 elements were combined and condensed into the 5-element sword essence, it would be a peerless sword essence. The peerless 5 elements sword essence. At this moment, Yi Guchen seemed to have found a direction. However, his 2 totems had not fully awakened, so he could only suppress them for now. On the other side, the Divine Condor was searching for the essence blood in the remains of the heavenly fire Divine Sparrow. The essence blood existed in the bone marrow of the heavenly fire Divine Sparrow. The Divine Condor had spent a lot of effort to find it. The essence blood was extremely viscous, like blood agate, and carried with it a vigorous and pure fluctuation. Without hesitation, the Divine Condor swallowed the essence blood into its stomach. In an instant, the Divine Condor's entire body was on fire, and its feathers were almost on fire. It opened its sharp beak and kept breathing fire. Yi Guchen was not worried about the Divine Condor. Its bloodline was extraordinary. However, Yi Guchen suddenly saw that there was a fire seed in the heaven fire Divine Sparrow's body. It was located at its ribs. That's the divine fire of the Vermilion Bird. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. He had not noticed the changes in the 5-colored golden core before. He only noticed it now. The power of the divine fire of the Vermilion Bird was not inferior to the special flames of heaven and earth. Not only that, if it was refined, it would be greatly beneficial to the Vermilion Bird totem. However, just as Yi Guchen was about to take the fire seed of the divine fire of the Vermilion Bird, a surprised and shocked voice suddenly rang out. That's the divine fire of the Vermilion Bird. As soon as the voice rang out, Yi Guchen turned around abruptly and looked at the young man who was rushing toward him. He was dressed in red and had a head of fiery red hair. His strange red crystal-like eyes were looking at the fire seed of the divine fire of the Vermilion Bird with a trace of extreme heat. It was the little Yen Emperor of the 3 imperial palaces, Ji Yen. This pressure is from a 7th-rank demonic beast. Furthermore, it's a 7th-rank demonic beast with the bloodline of the Vermilion Bird. Yi Guchen, you're really lucky. Ji Yen looked at Yi Guchen with a sharp gaze. Obviously, he did not think that Yi Guchen had the ability to deal with the demonic beasts in the mountain range. He thought that Yi Guchen had just picked up a bargain. Yi Guchen ignored Ji Yen and rushed toward the divine fire of the Vermilion Bird. Leave it for me. Whether it's the divine fire of the Vermilion Bird or the blood essence, both are greatly beneficial to me. Yi Guchen, with your genuine qi gone, you can't protect them. Ji Yen did not hesitate and attacked directly. He punched out with a powerful flaming genuine qi and the aura of the 7th transformation of the divine soul realm. Yi Guchen raised his eyebrows. At this moment, the divine condor had just swallowed the blood essence of the heavenly fire divine sparrow and was on fire. It could not help Yi Guchen for the time being. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed in the face of Ji Yan's powerful punch. He did not immediately summon the blood cloud centipede. Instead, he wanted to test the strength of his totemic power. Yi Guchen first activated the invincible Vajra body. His entire body glowed with a golden light, and he looked like a golden art. He carried with him a powerful aura that could shatter the earth and collapse mountains. He also punched out. The blazing vermilion bird totemic power erupted like flames, and it was extremely hot. What? Didn't you lose all your genuine chi? How is this possible? Ji Yan's eyes were filled with shock. Boom! With a loud bang, a blazing wave of energy rippled out in all directions. Yi Guchen let out a muffled groan in his chest and retreated a few dozen steps. On the other hand, Ji Yan only retreated a few steps. However, Ji Yan's face was still filled with shock. No, that's not genuine chi. That's totemic power. How is this possible? How can you possess the barbarian tribe's totemic power? Ji Yan's eyes were filled with shock. He had been to the Great Wall of the Great Desolate Prefecture and fought with some of the saints and saintesses of the Five Elements barbarian tribe. Naturally, he knew about this totemic power. However, what surprised Ji Yan the most was that he realized that Yi Guchen's totemic power was purer than the totemic power of the saints and saintesses. Cough. Yi Guchen coughed dryly and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. With his genuine chi cultivation, it was still a little difficult for him to deal with a seventh transformation prodigy. However, what surprised Yi Guchen was that he could indeed use this totemic power freely. Yi Guchen, so what if you can use the totemic power? You still can't overturn the heavens. Ji Yan slowly raised his hand and snapped his fingers. In the blink of an eye, a scarlet flame spewed out and burned fiercely. Heavenly mystical fire. Yi Guchen's eyes narrowed. Chapter 287. Rare flames of heaven and earth were extremely rare. Yi Guchen had once obtained the heavenly sun Xianming fire by chance, but that was only by chance. Now, Ji Yan had also summoned his own rare flame of heaven and earth. The scarlet flames that spewed out emitted a heart-palpitating temperature. At the same time, Yi Guchen could also feel the violent aura contained in the flames. Yi Guchen, I'll show you the power of the crimson bright flame. Flames rose from Ji Yan's palm, rolling and surging, turning into a fireball that blasted directly at Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed as he summoned his own rare flame of heaven and earth, the heavenly sun Xianming fire. Scarlet flames mixed with dark blue surged out. At the same time, he held the meteor soft sword in his hand. The flames spread along the sharp blade, and then the entire sword was covered in raging flames. You really do have a rare flame of heaven and earth. Ji Yan's eyes narrowed. He cultivated a fire attribute cultivation method, and by chance, he had obtained the extremely powerful crimson bright heavenly flame. Even so, he still desired more rare flames of heaven and earth. The more rare flames he refined, the stronger he would be. This was also the reason why Ji Yan wanted the vermilion bird divine flame. Swoosh! The meteor soft sword that carried the heavenly sun Xianming fire stabbed at the fireball formed by the crimson bright flame. In an instant, the flames surged, scattering in all directions. Yi Guchen's figure also retreated continuously. Yi Guchen, are you still going to pointlessly resist? If you continue to struggle, perhaps I'll have to take the rare flame of heaven and earth that you possess. Ji Yan stared at Yi Guchen's heavenly sun Xianming fire with blazing eyes. Although the heavenly sun Xianming fire had been refined by Yi Guchen, Ji Yan still had the means to strip it. Naive. Yi Guchen's eyes were cold, without the slightest fluctuation. You're courting death. Do you still think you're the sword master Yi Guchen of the past? Ji Yan had a violent temper. His eyes darkened when he heard Yi Guchen's words. Flame devil burning heaven seal. Ji Yan formed a seal with his hands and the crimson bright fire gathered together, turning into a red demonic seal that carried with it surging waves of heat. With Ji Yan's cultivation at the seventh transformation of the divine soul realm, his true chi had long since condensed into a physical form. At this moment, he carried the flame demon burning heaven seal and blasted towards Yi Guchen with a powerful aura. At this moment, Yi Guchen's mind was completely empty as he activated the vermilion bird totem on his chest with all his might. The vermilion bird totem was one of the Tao of palm fire. As long as Yi Guchen possessed the vermilion bird totem, he would have a certain degree of resistance to any kind of flame, even if it was a unique flame. At this moment, Yiguchen was comprehending the Tao of fire while he was defending himself with his sword. His sword seemed to have transformed into flames, swift, violent, and scorching. Boom, boom, boom. A series of air explosions sounded. The flame demon burning sky seal completely exploded, bringing out a cluster of blazing air waves, causing the originally somewhat charred mountain call to become a charred demonic land. Humph, you overestimate yourself. Ji Yen shook his head slightly as he looked at the figure drowned in the crimson bright fire. However, just as Ji Yen was about to collect the vermilion bird divine fire, a figure slowly walked out of the remaining flames. Ji Yan's heart thumped. Yiguchen walked out of the strange flames unscathed. A pair of extremely gorgeous fiery red wings appeared on his back. The wings folded together like a fire shield, isolating Yiguchen's body from the crimson bright fire. Not only that, Yiguchen even began to absorb the surrounding crimson bright fire to strengthen his vermilion bird totem. How is this possible? Ji Yan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He naturally knew how powerful his crimson bright fire was. Not to mention Yiguchen, who had no true chi, even a prodigy at the 7th transformation of the divine soul realm of the same level would be very wary of his crimson bright fire. Unfortunately, Yiguchen's vermilion bird totem was the strongest fire attribute totem and just happened to restrain all flames. Although it didn't make Yiguchen completely immune to the power of the crimson bright fire, there was no need for him to be overly wary. Let's do it again. Yiguchen's eyes were very bright as he struck out with his sword again. While he was dueling with Ji Yen, he was also using Ji Yen as a whetstone to comprehend the concept of fire contained within the vermilion bird totem. Yiguchen wanted to fuse sword intent and concept of fire together to derive the sword intent of fire. As Yiguchen and Ji Yen exchanged blows again, the crimson bright fire and heavenly sun dark fire in the field also splashed in all directions. However, what shocked Ji Yen was that as he exchanged blows with Yiguchen, he increasingly discovered that Yiguchen's swordsmanship was more violent and swift like flames. Ji Yen also vaguely sensed the violent sword intent that Yiguchen exuded. Damn it, the sword sect is using me to test their swordsmanship. Ji Yan's expression was also extremely gloomy. As one of the 3 princes of the 3 imperial palaces, his status was extraordinary. Apart from the 2 people ranked above him, he could be said to be high and mighty. Even if he couldn't defeat a top prodigy like Xian Hao, he still had a shred of ability to protect himself. However, Yiguchen's true chi was completely crippled. He was only using the power of the totem, yet he could still contend with him for so long. Ji Yen couldn't accept this. Of course, this was also because the vermilion bird totem just happened to restrain fire. Otherwise, with Yiguchen's current strength, it would be difficult for him to contend with a prodigy like Ji Yen, who was at the 7th transformation of the divine soul stage. Yiguchen, you've really angered me. Ji Yen gritted his teeth. The origin ring on his finger flashed as he took out a crimson fan. This fan was covered in spirit patterns that faintly formed a formation. It was clearly a powerful weapon with spirit patterns. Mystical Fire Treasure Fan, Heavenly Fire Waterfall. Ji Yen held the Mystical Fire Treasure Fan and gently fanned it. In an instant, flames surged out wildly. The intensity of the flames was far greater than before. It's about time. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. The reason he had personally taken action before was firstly to test his usage of the totem's power, and secondly to train his fire sword will. Now that Ji Yen had even taken out a weapon with spirit patterns, Yiguchen's current strength was still very difficult to contend with. He was very decisive. With a flash of his origin ring, he took out the blood cloud puppet. The blood-red figure flashed out, directly ignoring the raging flames that covered the sky. With a punch, the surrounding air was completely compressed. Even the flames seemed to be blocked by a wall of air, unable to threaten Yiguchen. This is a puppet, damn it. The moment Ji Yen saw the blood cloud puppet, the corners of his eyes twitched. He naturally sensed the strength of this puppet. Boom! The blood cloud puppet punched out. Ji Yen hurriedly used the mystical fire treasure fan to block, but in the end he was still crushed by the huge force. Although Yi Guchen did not let the blood cloud puppet unleash the power of the life and death hidden latch in order to conserve the energy of the demonic cloud blood crystal, this punch was enough to injure Ji Yen. Damn it, Yi Guchen, since you have such a puppet, you actually fought with me for so long. You're using me as a whetstone. Ji Yan's expression was extremely ugly. I still have to thank you. Yi Guchen smiled faintly. Hearing Yi Guchen's indifferent tone, Ji Yan was so angry that he almost vomited blood. All the pores on his body seemed to be spewing flames of anger. He looked at the blood cloud puppet, then glanced at the vermilion bird divine fire reluctantly. He gritted his teeth and suddenly retreated. Sword sect Yi Guchen, very good. I, little flame emperor, will remember you. Ji Yan's figure retreated explosively as he executed one of his movement techniques, which was like a blazing fire. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed. If he used the vermilion bird wings, he might be able to catch up. However, there was already a huge commotion here. In addition, the rank 5 demonic beasts had already been killed by the blood cloud puppet. It would definitely attract the attention of many prodigies and elites. I can't stay here for long. Collect the vermilion bird divine fire. Yi Guchen was determined. Chapter 288. Yi Guchen rushed to the remains of the heavenly fire divine sparrow. Behind him, the wings of the vermilion bird flapped slowly. With the protection of the wings of the vermilion bird and the vermilion bird totem, Yi Guchen was immune to the flames here. He entered the remains of the heavenly fire divine sparrow and activated the vermilion bird totem on his chest. At the same time, he reached out and grabbed the divine fire of the vermilion bird. Just as Yi Guchen touched the divine fire of the vermilion bird, the 5-colored golden core in his dantian shone again. The divine fire of the vermilion bird turned into a stream of red light and entered the 5-colored golden core in Yi Guchen's dantian. As the divine fire of the vermilion bird was absorbed into the 5-colored golden core, the vermilion bird totem on Yi Guchen's chest seemed to become brighter. Vaguely, he could hear the loud cry of the vermilion bird. At this moment, the divine fire of the vermilion bird surged around Yi Guchen. The power of this red flame was even stronger than the heavenly sun Xianming fire. At the same time, Yi Guchen seemed to have gained a deeper understanding of the Tao of fire. This is not a place for enlightenment. Let's find a quieter place. Yi Guchen temporarily suppressed the enlightenment in his heart. He could vaguely sense the sound of rushing wind coming from outside the mountain range. Just as Yi Guchen was about to call the divine eagle to leave with him, he suddenly realized that the divine eagle had collapsed on the ground, its body on fire. Brother Eagle, what happened to you? Even with Yi Guchen's composure, he was shocked. He had only been distracted for a moment, and the divine eagle had become like this. Damn it, Grandpa Condor will not eat too much next time. Ouch, Grandpa Condor's stomach hurts. The divine eagle wailed, its body on fire. It had already swallowed the monster cores of several rank 5 demonic beasts. Now, it had absorbed all the blood of the heavenly fire divine sparrow. With that kind of vigorous energy, if it was an ordinary rank 4 demonic beast, it would have long exploded and died. However, the divine condor's physique and bloodlines seemed to be very special. Although it looked half dead, Yi Guchen examined it carefully and found that it was not in mortal danger. Then, under Yi Guchen's astonished gaze, the divine eagle's body slowly shrank in a ball of red light. In the end, the entire body of the divine eagle was engulfed in flames. Brother Condor? Yi Guchen's eyelids twitched. Don't worry, little Yi. Grandpa Condor is about to transform. Remember to take good care of me. Amidst the flames, the voice of the divine condor grew smaller and more tender. In the end, it sounded like the voice of a baby. Finally, the flames dissipated and an egg appeared in front of Yi Guchen. It was a fiery red egg that looked like a crimson crystal. Its surface was covered with countless mysterious demonic patterns. It looked very ancient and complicated. Inside the egg, there was an extremely vigorous energy. This. Yiguchen was momentarily stunned. He also did not expect that the divine eagle would turn into a crimson egg in the end. Let's leave first. Yiguchen put away the crimson egg. He realized that this egg could be stored in a origin ring. Normally, origin rings could not contain living things. Looks like this is Brother Condor's opportunity. Yiguchen thought to himself. The wings of the vermilion bird appeared behind his back. They were extremely beautiful. The wings of the vermilion bird were not real. They were formed by the power of totems. On the wings, there were flaming light and flowing rune patterns. Yiguchen's vermilion bird wings flapped. His body blurred instantly and turned into a streak of red light. In the blink of an eye, he flashed away. Not long after, the sound of rushing wind could be heard. There were elite disciples from various forces. Their eyes were fixed on the remains of the divine eagle as they beat their chests and stamped their feet. The vermilion bird divine fire, blood essence, and other things had been taken by Yiguchen and the divine eagle. Naturally, this place had no value. Sigh, we're a step too late. Someone sighed. Did you see a figure flapping its wings and flying away? Someone asked suspiciously. He seemed to have seen a streak of red light fly away. Are you stupid? Wings of true chi. That's a skill that only life and death chamber experts have. Do you think any of the 7 forces have broken through to the life and death chamber? Someone snorted coldly. That's right. My eyes must be playing tricks on me. That person said embarrassedly. The ancient mountain forest stretched as far as the eye could see. Many dilapidated palaces were scattered in the forest, bringing with them a desolate and decadent aura. In the air, a streak of red light flew over and stopped in midair. As the gorgeous red wings flapped, the surrounding air was slightly distorted. A wave of blazing light was emitted. It was Yiguchen. He looked around and found that there was no one else here. Then he landed. In this void sword realm, it's better to keep a low profile. After the wings of vermilion bird is displayed, although I can fly and my speed is also very fast, the surging flame is too conspicuous. It's easy to be secretly watched by others. Yiguchen's eyes flashed and he thought to himself. At the same time, he also found that maintaining the vermilion bird wings consumed a lot of totem power. At least, with Yiguchen's current totem power, he couldn't maintain it for a long time. But no matter what, I already have a goal. Yiguchen's eyes flashed with a trace of excitement. He saw another path of sword principle. Through the 5-colored totem, he could comprehend the Tao of 5 elements and condense the sword intent of 5 elements. Then, Yiguchen also began to comprehend the sword intent of fire in this place where no one would disturb him. After absorbing the vermilion bird divine fire, Yiguchen's vermilion bird totem power became stronger. His comprehension of the Tao of fire also deepened a lot. Yiguchen drew his sword. The sword momentum was as fast and violent as a raging fire. The Tao of fire was the Tao of violent burning. The sword intent of fire was extremely powerful. Yiguchen put a leaf of enlightenment in his mouth. In an instant, there was a kind of enlightenment in his heart. Perhaps it was difficult to comprehend the peerless sword intent. But if it was an ordinary sword intent, it was not impossible for Yiguchen. In this way, a day passed. Yiguchen kept practicing his sword. The surrounding land had already been scorched black. His sword momentum was like a violent explosion. As soon as he drew his sword, the flames flashed and directly burned a towering ancient tree in front of him into charcoal. Then it exploded into countless flying ashes. The prototype of the sword intent of fire has been formed. Yiguchen was panting slightly. He was sweating all over. Now, he had some understanding of the sword intent of fire, but he had not really mastered it yet. As long as I can completely awaken the vermilion bird totem, I can directly master the sword intent of fire. Yiguchen's eyes shone with certainty. The best way to awaken all the totems on the 5-color golden core was to go to the land of 5 elements. There were not only demonic beasts in the land of 5 elements, but also many divine objects of the 5 elements. It was very helpful for comprehending the Tao of the 5 elements. After the breakthrough in the void sword realm, I'll see if there's a chance to go to the land of 5 elements. On the one hand, I'll find the divine medicine. On the other hand, I'll transform the 5-color totem. Yi Guchen had a plan in mind. The power of the totem was a kind of power that was not weaker than genuine qi. Otherwise, the holy sons and holy daughters of the 5 elements brute tribe would not have been able to compete with the geniuses of the 7 superpowers. Just as Yi Guchen was thinking about the next arrangements, the communication jade slip in his origin ring suddenly reacted. Brother Yi, quickly come and join us. The sword pavilion is open. Chu Qingqi's voice came. The sword pavilion? With the background of the Void Sword faction, what kind of swordsmanship is hidden in it? Yi Guchen's eyes lit up again. Yi Guchen was also very curious about the famous Opportunity Land in the Void Sword realm. Chapter 289. The Sword Pavilion was located in a valley within the Void Sword realm. Due to the fact that it had been opened several times, the Sword Pavilion was one of the few well-known treasure lands within the Void Sword realm. At this moment, there was a magnificent pavilion within the valley. Due to the defensive formation engraved around it, the Sword Pavilion was not dilapidated. It looked simple and majestic. In the middle of the pavilion, there was a plaque with the words, Sword Pavilion, written on it. It looked as if it had been there for a long time and had a sharp edge that was hard to look at. At the entrance of the valley, there were many figures. The genius disciples of some forces had all gathered here. After all, the Sword Pavilion was one of the safest treasure lands. There was no danger to one's life. At the same time, if one was lucky enough, one could obtain extraordinary swordsmanship and cultivation techniques. For example, the Void Sword technique of the Limitless Sword sect was passed down from the Sword Pavilion. Moreover, the Void Sword technique was not the most advanced swordsmanship in the Sword Pavilion. One should know that the Void Sword faction in ancient times was extremely prosperous. Its strength was even greater than the current 7 major forces combined. It could be seen how rich its foundation was. How could there only be spiritual-level sword techniques in the Sword Pavilion of such a large sect? Not far away, Yi Guchen's figure flashed over. He did not use the vermilion bird wings. Firstly, it was too conspicuous. Secondly, the vermilion bird wings could also be used as a hidden life-saving means. It was best not to expose it. Is that the Sword Pavilion? Although he had not yet entered the Sword Pavilion, Yi Guchen could feel the sword qi contained in the Sword Pavilion just by looking at it from the outside. This was an irresistible temptation for sword cultivators. As Yi Guchen approached the entrance of the valley, he saw Chu Qingqi and the other disciples of the sword sect's inner yard. Almost all the geniuses and elites of other forces were there. Only the saber-sealing king palace was not there. Yi Guchen thought that perhaps the saber cultivators of the saber-sealing king palace were incompatible with the Sword Pavilion. There was no need to waste time here. Brother Yi Guchen, you're here. Chu Qingqi and the others' eyes lit up when they saw Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen glanced around and saw Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, and Mu Xingzhu. In the inner court, Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, Ji Ling, Li Lingxiao, Teng Jingshan, and the others were waiting. Compared to the enthusiasm of Chu Qingqi and the others, Wang Xiaonan, Li Lingxiao, and the others were cold and indifferent. Yi Guchen did not mind and did not greet him. There was no need for him to stick his warm face to someone's cold butt. Senior brother Yi, Mu Xingzhu called out tenderly. Then she landed in front of Yi Guchen like a young swallow returning to its nest. What's wrong? Yi Guchen frowned when he saw the trace of uneasiness in Mu Xingzhu's watery eyes. It's nothing serious. It's just that Xingzhu feels like there's a ghost following behind Xingzhu. Mu Xingzhu pursed her lips and frowned. Although she was resilient, she was still a young girl. She was still very afraid when faced with ghosts and supernatural things. Ghost? How is that possible? Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. It's true. A blue ghost shadow seems to be watching Xingzhu from the shadows. Mu Xingzhu's large eyes darted around and looked around suspiciously. Suddenly Yi Guchen shuddered. This was a subconscious reaction when encountering danger. Who is it? Yiguchen suddenly turned his head and looked at the dense forest in the distance. However, there was nothing. But just now, Yiguchen did feel that there was a gaze behind him. However, it was that gaze that made Yiguchen feel extreme danger. His hair stood on end. That faint sense of oppression was something that even Qin Baijian and the other spirit bridge experts could not give him. Senior brother Yi, do you believe me now? Mu Xingzu bit her lip and grabbed Yiguchen's sleeve. Don't worry. There are many people here. Nothing serious will happen. Let's put this matter aside for the time being. I will think of a way. Yiguchen frowned and comforted Mu Xingzu. Mu Xingzu instinctively trusted Yiguchen. Now that she was comforted, she calmed down. Who is it? But it's useless to think about it now. If it's really an unpredictable existence, it's futile to resist. Yiguchen put this matter aside for the time being and focused on the opportunities in the Sword Pavilion. At this moment, the defensive formation around the Sword Pavilion was flowing with light and seemed to be trembling. The Sword Pavilion is about to open. Chu Qingqi's eyes were also filled with anticipation. How do I obtain the sword techniques in the Sword Pavilion? Yiguchen asked curiously. Brother Yi, do you know why the opportunities in the Sword Pavilion have not been taken away even though the Void Sword realm has opened several times? Chu Qingqi kept him in suspense. I'd like to hear the details, Yiguchen said. The jade slips that record the sword techniques in the Sword Pavilion are all sealed in balls of light. According to the colors and strength of the balls of light, the level of the sword techniques contained in them are also different. These balls of light can only be obtained by those who are fated to obtain them. If not, it will be difficult to obtain them, Chu Qingqi explained. I see. It's so strange. Yiguchen's eyes were filled with interest. He was very curious about what his opportunities would be. Rumble. Just as Yiguchen was thinking, the defensive formation trembled even more violently, as if the Sword Pavilion was about to open. However, at this moment, Murong Ditian stepped out from among the disciples of the Wuji sword sect. He glanced at Yiguchen with a playful and vengeful smile in his eyes. Everyone, I am Murong Ditian, a disciple of the Sun Moon Hall of the Wuji sword sect. I would like to make a suggestion. Murong Ditian's words attracted the attention of all the disciples of the various forces. Murong Ditian was originally the #1 genius in the Donglin Mansion and had an extraordinary reputation. After joining the Wuji sword sect, he entered the Sun Moon Hall to cultivate almost immediately. After that, he improved rapidly and reached the 3rd transformation of the godly soul realm. His words carried some weight and attracted the attention of everyone. Everyone knows that the opportunities in the Sword Pavilion are obtained by those who are fated to obtain them. However, if we allow some people with low talent and no strength to enter, not only will they disrupt the situation, but they will also waste the opportunities. Do you think such people are qualified to enter? Murong Ditian's tone was indifferent as he spoke. Hearing those words, many of the geniuses nodded inwardly. Yiguchen furrowed his brows quietly. As expected, in the next moment, Murong Ditian's words changed. His eyes were like swords as he looked at Yiguchen and said, for example, Yiguchen's cultivation is crippled and his strength is low. What qualifications does he have to enter the Sword Pavilion to obtain the opportunities? Following Murong Ditian's cold shout, the gazes of all the disciples from the various powers uniformly landed on Yiguchen. In an instant, many people's eyes flickered as they pondered. After all, it was every man for himself. Although there were many people who admired Yiguchen's character, most of them were still selfish and only thought of their own benefits. That's right. Yiguchen's cultivation is crippled. What qualifications does he have to enter the Sword Pavilion? Xian Ying stepped out from the Wuji sword sect's camp. During the elite gathering, it could be said that he had become a huge laughingstock because of Yiguchen. He even lost to Yiguchen in the Void Sword technique. This caused Xian Ying to be mocked by everyone when he returned to the Wuji sword sect. Therefore, Xian Ying hated Yiguchen to the core. As for Xian Hao, he stood at the front of the Wuji sword sect's disciples. He did not say anything and did not express his opinion. It was as if he did not care about anything else and did not care about Yiguchen's crippled cultivation. That's right. I also think that Yiguchen does not have the qualifications. On the other side, Prince Yuani also stood out from the Saint Origin Academy with a cold smile on his face. Young Ho Fangchen, who was beside him, stood in the same camp as him. I also agree that Yiguchen does not have the qualifications to enter. A gaze filled with anger looked at Yiguchen. It was the little flame emperor of the 3 imperial palaces, Jiyen. I also think that a cripple like Yiguchen does not have the qualifications to enter. On the Consonance Palace's side, Pan Shuelyan twisted her slender waist and said with a playful and mocking tone. She looked at Yiguchen as if she wanted to enjoy Yiguchen's embarrassed and angry look. At this moment, many opposing Sky Pride stood out to force Yiguchen to step down. Chapter 290. Outside the Sword Pavilion, the air was filled with the smell of gunpowder. Feeling the gazes of the elites, the inner court disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda slightly changed their expressions. It would be fine if it was just one faction targeting them, but because of Yiguchen, the Limitless Sword Sect, Saint Origin Academy, 3 Imperial Palaces, and Rhinoceros Divine Palace all stood out. The impact was huge. Even Ji Ling and the other inner court geniuses had grave expressions. However, Yiguchen, who was at the center of the storm, was still as calm as water. His gaze swept across everyone. He wasn't angry, wasn't embarrassed, and spoke with a very calm tone. Who dares to attack? You can try. Yiguchen's hands were behind his back. Although he didn't emit any true chi, his imposing aura was still shocking. Yiguchen, do you still think you're the sword sect of the past? Saying such words now is just a joke. Murong Ditian took a step forward. Not only him, but the Sun Moon Hall disciples, Rhinoceros Divine Palace's Pan Shuelyan, 3 Imperial Palaces Ji Yen, Saint Origin Academy's Prince Yuani, Fang Qin, and the others all stepped forward at the same time. All of a sudden, all the disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda, including Yiguchen, were surrounded by several factions. Other disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda, do you think what I said makes sense? Is Yiguchen not qualified to enter? Murong Ditian's tone had a trace of playfulness as he looked at the group of people of the Sword Sect Pagoda. In your dreams? Ji Ling was the first to step forward. She had an extroverted personality and was more like a big sister. Moreover, she was ranked 4th in the inner court, so she naturally had the qualifications to step forward. Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, Mu Xingzhu, and the others also stood beside Yiguchen and looked at him with hostility. At this moment, a discordant voice sounded from the inner court. I think what Murong Ditian said makes sense. If one doesn't have the strength, entering is just a waste of opportunity. Once this was said, many inner court disciples' expressions changed. Ji Ling's expression also changed slightly as she turned towards the person who spoke. It was none other than Wang Xiaohun, ranked 3rd in the inner yard. What nonsense are you talking about? Yiguchen is a disciple of my sword sect's inner court. Could it be that you're siding with an outsider? Ji Ling rebuked. I'm just telling the truth. Wang Xiaotian shrugged. Not only that, but Li Lingxiao, who ranked 6th in the inner yard, also said, I also think that it's better for Yiguchen to stay outside. Even if he enters, he won't be able to obtain any opportunities. That's right. Right now, the major forces are targeting Yiguchen, not the inner courtyard. Although I, Cheng Jingshan, am also an inner courtyard disciple, I don't want to be dragged down by Yiguchen. All you need to do is target Yiguchen. Teng Jingshan spoke in a cold and resolute tone. All of you. Ji Ling was so angry that she couldn't vent her anger. She gnashed her teeth and turned her beautiful eyes to Bai Zichen, who had been silent all this time. Right now, only the 2nd in the inner courtyard, Bai Zichen, who possessed an unfathomable cultivation, could turn the situation around. Bai Zichen raised his eyebrows slightly when he sensed Ji Ling's gaze. He pondered for a moment before he finally said, I will do my best to obtain the opportunities in the sword pavilion for the inner courtyard. As for Yiguchen, he can rest outside. The eyes of all the inner courtyard disciples flickered when they heard those words. Are all of you still from the same sect? Mu Xingzu extended her finger and pointed at all the silent inner courtyard disciples. She was so angry that she was about to cry. She felt wronged for Yi Guchen. Sigh. Chu Qingqi and Yi Xie also tightly frowned. Yi Guchen, do you see that? Even the sect you belong to can't tolerate you. Tell me, what qualifications do you have to make a fool of yourself here? Murong Ditian laughed heartily. He laughed very happily. He had been suppressed by Yi Guchen many times before, and he had been holding back his anger for a long time. Now that he could finally release it, his mood was incomparably carefree. Yi Guchen's expression didn't change from beginning to end. His gaze swept across the inner courtyard disciples. A portion of the disciples lowered their heads with a trace of shame. There was also a portion of people who were like Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao and the rest, coldly watching from the sidelines. Yi Guchen lightly shook his head and laughed. He had a cold temperament and wasn't a sociable person to begin with. However, just as Yi Guchen's situation was turning bad, an elegant voice rang out. Zither Fairy, do you think that everyone has the opportunity to try the opportunities in the Sword Pavilion? Or do you, Murong Ditian, look down on those with lower cultivation than you? Zither Fairy, who was dressed in pink, stepped out from the consonant's divine palace's side as she pursed her lips and smiled. There were many cultivators with first transformation and second transformation amongst the cultivators present. Their gazes carried a trace of hostility when they heard Zither Fairy's words as they looked towards Murong Ditian. Murong Ditian's voice was sluggish. I also think that the opportunities in the Sword Pavilion are for those who are fated to learn about them. Everyone has the opportunity. Chen Yi, who was dressed in green from the Nine Profound Sect's side, stood out and laughed. Everyone can enter my Sword Sect's pagoda forest. To everyone's surprise, Yuan Mie, who had been silent, suddenly stood out and spoke with a cold voice. His gaze wasn't looking at Yi Guchen or Murong Ditian, but towards Prince Yuan. Obviously, Yuan Mie was targeting Prince Yuan. At this moment, the originally disadvantageous situation for Yi Guchen instantly fell into a subtle state. Zither Fairy, Chen Yi and the rest's words carried a lot of weight. Even Murong Ditian couldn't say anything. In any case, not a single disciple of my Sword Sect's pagoda forest can be missing. Try it if you have the guts. Ji Ling stepped out and looked at Murong Ditian with her beautiful eyes. At this moment, Murong Ditian, Prince Yuani and the rest's faces stiffened. Just as the situation was in a deadlock, the defensive array outside the Sword Pavilion gradually weakened and disappeared amidst loud rumbling sounds. The Sword Pavilion has opened. At this moment, no one hesitated anymore. Everyone's gazes were filled with extreme passion as they looked at the Sword Pavilion's door that was slowly opening. Bush. Figures rushed into the Sword Pavilion one after another like locusts. Without strength, let's see how you're going to fight for opportunities in the Sword Pavilion. Murong Ditian waved his sleeve and didn't stay in a deadlock any longer. He also flew towards the Sword Pavilion. Let's go, Yi Guchen said indifferently. Mu Xingzu and the rest nodded and followed beside Yi Guchen. It was as if Yi Guchen and the rest were in a small circle, while the rest of the inner court disciples were in another circle. Yi Guchen, senior sister hopes that you won't mind this kind of thing. Ji Ling's delicate figure flashed over from the side. She bit her lips slightly and looked at Yi Guchen. I have never minded this kind of thing. Yi Guchen's gaze was indifferent. Hearing Yi Guchen's indifferent tone, Ji Ling could only smile bitterly. But for some reason, Ji Ling had the feeling that these inner court disciples who were watching from the sidelines would soon regret their decision. Chapter 291. As the place where the Void Sword sect collected cultivation methods and swordsmanship in ancient times, the Sword Pavilion naturally had an extraordinary background. As soon as the elites of the Seven Forces stepped in, they felt a kind of vigorous and dignified pressure of the sword. Under this pressure, some people with weaker cultivations even felt a sense of suffocation. Is that an opportunity? Yi Guchen looked around the interior of the Sword Pavilion. This place was completely different from the sword technique pavilion in the sword sect forest of pagodas. The jade slips that recorded cultivation methods and swordsmanship were not placed on the shelves for people to obtain, but were wrapped in balls of light. Each ball of light was extremely agile and scattered in the air. Without an opportunity or strength, it was difficult to obtain them. Brother Yi, look at those balls of light. The white ones are ordinary Xiantian swordsmanship, while the yellow ones are superb Xiantian swordsmanship, Chu Qingqi said. The Void Sword sect is extremely powerful. How can there only be Xiantian swordsmanship? Yi Guchen frowned slightly. This is the first level of the sword pavilion, and the most precious swordsmanship is only superb Xiantian swordsmanship. There is a second level above, which has spiritual level swordsmanship, and a third level has king level swordsmanship. However, it seems that there are some harsh conditions to enter the third level. I'm not quite sure, Chu Qingqi explained. Yi Guchen nodded slightly and said nothing. In the first level of the sword pavilion, after sensing the many people who had entered, the originally quiet light clusters suddenly began to move about chaotically. Among the densely packed clusters of light, most of them were white, while the rest were yellow. In the face of these swordsmanship, the heavenly legends of the seven forces were very casual and just grabbed some of them casually. However, there were also some weaker people who worked hard to grab the balls of light. Yi Guchen took a step forward and wanted to grab a white ball of light to have a look. Just as Yi Guchen stretched out his hand, the white ball of light hurriedly avoided Yi Guchen's hand as if it were a snake or a scorpion. Even Yi Guchen was confused and somewhat puzzled. His eyes flickered and he took another step forward, trying to grab a white ball of light. But without exception, those white balls of light seemed to be deliberately avoiding Yi Guchen. As a result, the first level of the sword pavilion was filled with countless balls of white light. However, not a single ball of light approached Yi Guchen. What's going on? Chu Qingqi and the others looked surprised. As far as they were concerned, even if Yi Guchen didn't have any true energy, he wouldn't be in such a state. When Mu Xingzhu saw this, she tried to grab one of the white balls of light. She easily caught it. This extremely strange scene also fell into the eyes of the others present. Yi Guchen, didn't I tell you not to come in here? You're just asking for a snub. Your true energy cultivation has been crippled, and even the Xiantian sword technique has been avoided by you. I don't think you're qualified to obtain it. Not far away, Murong Ditian sneered. Then, as if he was showing off, he casually waved his hand, and a few white balls of light were caught in his hand. On the other side, Prince Yuani also smiled playfully when he saw this, and casually grabbed many balls of light. Hee, Yi Guchen, where's your pride? Do you want me to give you a ball of light? Pan Shuelian moved lightly and casually grabbed a white ball of light. She waved it at Yi Guchen, full of mockery. Not only those who had a grudge against Yi Guchen, but even those from the inner yard, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, Teng Jingshan and the others also looked like they were watching a good show. Sigh, I told you to stay outside. Bai Zichen shook his head slightly. Yi Guchen ignored those gazes and frowned. However, no matter where he went, those balls of light escaped as if they couldn't avoid him. No, that's not right. It's not because I'm not qualified to obtain these white balls of light, but because these white balls of light don't approach me. It's as if they're not worthy of me. Yi Guchen suddenly had an idea. He didn't say this because he was arrogant, but because it was the truth. As those balls of light escaped, they were also trembling slightly, as if they knew that they weren't worthy of Yi Guchen. It was as if all the famous swords in the forest of 1,000 swords were trembling after sensing Yi Guchen's sword aura, and were willing to be controlled by Yi Guchen. These balls of light had spirituality. I see. Then it seems that I'm destined to gain nothing on this level. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered, but he wasn't disappointed. The sword techniques on the first level of the sword pavilion were at most supreme grade innate sword techniques. With Yi Guchen's current level, there wasn't much point in cultivating such a sword technique. After knowing the reason, Yi Guchen didn't do anything futile. Instead, he stood indifferently and watched the others collect the balls of light. Have you already given up? Murong Ditian and the others looked coldly at Yi Guchen. The other enemies, such as Prince Yuanyi, Ji Yan, and Pan Shuelian, sneered. Even Wang Xiaotian and the others in the inner court were watching coldly from the side. They felt that Yi Guchen was overestimating himself. Junior brother Yi, take them. Ji Ling walked over and handed a few balls of light, which were supreme-grade innate sword techniques, to Yi Guchen. What's the meaning of this? Yi Guchen was surprised. Since you've entered the sword pavilion, you can't possibly gain nothing, right? Take these. At least you've gained something. When we enter the second level, I'll help you obtain some spiritual sword techniques, said Ji Ling, senior sister. Thank you for your kind intentions, but there's no need for that, smiled Yi Guchen as he waved his hand. You are really a blockhead. What's the point of being angry? Ji Ling gnashed her teeth. She felt that she was doing it for Yi Guchen's good, but Yi Guchen didn't appreciate it. There's really no need for that, said Yi Guchen helplessly. Sigh. All right then. A hint of disappointment appeared in Ji Ling's eyes. She hoped that Yi Guchen would let bygones be bygones and not be estranged from the other disciples. But it was clearly useless against Yi Guchen. For a moment, there were only 2 people in the Sword Pavilion's first level that didn't make a move. One of them was Yi Guchen, and the other was Xian Hao. Senior brother Xian Hao probably won't even spare a glance at these balls of light, right? That's for sure. Senior brother Xian Hao's goal is to obtain spiritual sword techniques at the very least, or even royal sword techniques at the 3rd level. Why would he be interested in these sword techniques? Tsk. Although both of them didn't make a move, Yi Guchen is completely different from senior brother Xian Hao. I really don't know why he still has the face to stay here. Some of the Limitless Sword Sect's disciples sneered. The Limitless Sword Sect and the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were sworn enemies. Naturally, they wouldn't miss such an opportunity to ridicule Xian Hao. On the other hand, some of the inner yard disciples' faces were burning as if they had been humiliated. The disciples who had been watching coldly from the sidelines looked at Yi Guchen with disdain. This Yi Guchen has really brought shame to our sword sect's talent. He's such a disgrace. He still hasn't left. If it were me, I would have buried my head in the ground in shame. Some of the inner yard disciples said coldly. Yi Guchen, the reputation that you have created in the sword sect Pagoda Forest will be completely destroyed at this moment. Wang Xiaotian was very happy. He felt that the resentment that he had been suppressing for a long time had finally been vented. As time passed, a formation that had been silent for a long time at the center of the first level of the Sword Pavilion finally erupted with divine light again. Along with a faint fluctuation, it seemed as if the space was shaking. It's the entrance to the second level of the Sword Pavilion. Some people exclaimed and couldn't be bothered to collect the balls of light. The second level was where many spiritual sword techniques were hidden. Its value was far from what the first level could compare to. I hope that the balls of light on the second level won't avoid me. I'm actually not picky. Yi Guchen sighed and shook his head with a trace of helplessness. It seemed that sometimes it was a mistake to have a high level of sword principle. Chapter 292. There were 3 levels in the Sword Pavilion in the Void Sword Realm. On the first level, the highest level was the Supreme Innate Sword Principle. On the second level, there was the Spiritual Level Sword Principle. For the elites of the 7 superpowers, the Spiritual Level Sword Principle was extremely valuable. As for the King Level Sword Principle, it was the most precious and core inheritance among the 7 superpowers. It was good enough to have a few of them. Therefore, for most of the disciples here, the Spiritual Level Sword Principle was their ultimate goal. As for the King Level Sword Principle, even if they were qualified to obtain it, they did not have the comprehension ability to comprehend it. The only way was to hand it over to the sect in exchange for benefits. As the formation in the center of the first level of the Sword Pavilion surged, it meant that the entrance to the second level had been opened. Enter! At this moment, the elite disciples of the 7 superpowers all rushed toward the formation. Swoosh! A figure flashed and was the first to enter the formation. So fast. That's Xian Hao. Yiguchen's eyes narrowed as he vaguely caught sight of the figure. The speed that Xianhao had displayed just now could be described as ghostly, causing Yiguchen to feel a trace of solemnity in his heart. Xianhao's strength was above Chen Yi, Ji Yan, Fang Chen, and the others. After Xianhao, the geniuses of the superpowers, including the elites, also entered in a flash. However, at this moment, there were some warriors below the Divine Soul realm who were directly blocked by the array. But why can't I enter the second level? Only those above the Divine Soul realm can enter the second level of the Sword Pavilion. The rest of you, give up, someone who had entered the Sword Pavilion said. This made the group of warriors change their expressions. Even Mu Xingzu bit her lip. Her cultivation had not reached the Divine Soul realm. Senior Brother Yi, it seems that Xingzhu can't enter the second level. Mu Xingzu stopped. Although there was a trace of unwillingness in her words, there was no other way. Xingzhu, don't give up. Yiguchen smiled faintly and grabbed Mu Xingzu with one hand. There seemed to be sword light flashing in his eyes as he rushed towards the formation. Feeling her little hand wrapped in Yiguchen's gentle hand, Mu Xingzu's heart relaxed for no reason. It seemed that as long as Yiguchen was here, all difficulties were no longer difficult. Heh! Yiguchen, the reason why I didn't enter directly was because I wanted to see how you would embarrass yourself here. Murong Ditian stood at the side of the formation as he sneered. Xian Ying was beside him. Even Ji Yan and Pan Shuelyan of the Rhino Divine Palace were still there. Pan Shuelyan looked at Mu Xingzu with extreme disgust in her eyes. She was very narrow-minded. Mu Xingzu had obtained the blue crystal pendant, which made Pan Shuelyan extremely unhappy. She also bore a grudge against Yiguchen. Lowly girl, is Yiguchen your backing? He has no vital energy, and his cultivation is not even as good as yours. How could he enter the second level? Pan Shuelyan crossed her arms in front of her chest, supporting her pair of big breasts, and mocked her mercilessly. Yiguchen, don't force yourself. Ji Ling sighed when he saw this. Since you are willing to wait, then wait here. Yiguchen glanced at Murong Ditian and the others with an indifferent gaze. Then, he pulled Mu Xingzu's hand and entered the formation. The moment they entered, Yiguchen emitted a trace of sword heart illumination. Then Yiguchen and Mu Xingzu disappeared from the formation. What's going on? Where did they go? Were they expelled? Could it be that they were sent out of the Sword Pavilion? At this moment, everyone who was still in the first level of the Sword Pavilion had dumbfounded expressions. You looked at me and I looked at you. There was confusion in their eyes. Even Murong Ditian's expression stiffened. Then, his expression changed slightly and he said as if he was comforting them, perhaps they have already been sent out. But at this moment, a ball of light appeared above the formation. Then, an image appeared in the air. It was the image of the second level of the Sword Pavilion. That's right. Every time the Sword Pavilion opens, there will be an image like this. Some experienced cultivators said. However, when Murong Ditian's gaze swept past the scene, his gaze was completely frozen. Yiguchen and Mu Xingzu appeared in the second level of the Sword Pavilion. How is this possible? Murong Ditian didn't believe it and his expression changed. He stepped into the magic array and was teleported to the second level. I don't believe it. I also don't believe it. The two of them have yet to break through to the Divine Soul realm. That Yiguchen doesn't have any true qi. How is it possible for him to enter the second level? Pan Shuelyan also let out a high-pitched scream. Her face was filled with disbelief as she stepped into the formation. Then the expressions of those who wanted to watch the show changed. They hurriedly entered the formation and could no longer maintain the calmness they had when they were watching the show. Could it be that Yiguchen is able to create a miracle here? Ji Ling opened her mouth in disbelief. As the figures flashed, other than the cultivators below the Divine Soul realm, the rest of the people entered the formation and arrived at the second level. However, no matter if it was Murong Ditian, Pan Shuelyan, Ji Yan, or even Prince Yuani, they all felt as if they were in a dream as they looked at the black-robed young man standing on the second level. Yiguchen, how is this possible? At this moment, Murong Ditian was at a loss for words, as if he couldn't say anything. Originally, they wanted to see Yiguchen make a fool of himself. However, from the looks of it, they, who were standing at the side of the formation and waiting, were the ones who looked like a joke. So what if you entered the second level? Can you obtain the light balls of sword techniques? Although Xianing was also in disbelief, he still clenched his teeth and said. When he said that, many people who were hostile towards Yiguchen seemed to have found a way to vent their anger as they hurriedly agreed with him. That's right. So what if Yiguchen entered the second level? He couldn't even obtain a single white ball of light on the first level. Could it be that he can obtain one on the second level? That's right. At the very least, the light balls on the second level contain spirit-grade sword techniques. It's even harder to obtain them than the first level. Yiguchen definitely won't obtain anything. At this moment, everyone who was hostile towards Yiguchen, including Wang Xiaotian and the others in the inner court, were certain that even if Yiguchen entered the second level, he wouldn't obtain anything. Senior brother Yi. At the side, Mu Xingzu's hand was still held by Yiguchen. There was also a trace of worry in her eyes. Xingzhu, among the spirit-grade sword techniques on the second level, which one are you interested in? Yiguchen's eyes were filled with an indescribable emotion as the corner of his mouth carried a faint smile. Senior brother. Mu Xingzu's eyes lit up slightly. She extended her slender finger and pointed at a crimson ball of light among the light balls that filled the sky. Lowly girl, that crimson ball of light represents a supreme spirit-grade sword technique. Even an ordinary genius might not be able to obtain it. Do you think Yiguchen has the ability to do so? The conversation between Yiguchen and Mu Xingzu was also heard by others. When Pan Shuelian heard it, the corner of her mouth lifted into a sneer as she spoke in a strange tone. All right, I'll give you whatever sword technique you want. Yiguchen nodded slightly and did not say anything. In the next moment, Yiguchen suddenly stomped his feet on the ground. Boom! With a loud bang, Yiguchen also emitted a mysterious sword essence. As soon as the sword essence was released, all the light balls on the second level of the sword pavilion froze for a moment before completely boiling. Those light balls that were dancing in midair seemed to have been injected with chicken blood as they instantly exploded. Then, all the light balls on the ground seemed to have gone crazy as they gathered towards Yiguchen. That ferocity was as if they were fighting for Yiguchen to obtain them. This scene completely shocked everyone present. Chapter 293. Murong Ditian's expression was lifeless and at a loss. He claimed to be the pride of the sword and had a rare talent in the sword Dao. Even so, it wasn't easy for him to obtain a sword technique on the second level of the sword pavilion, especially a supreme spiritual sword technique. However, at this moment, on the second level of the sword pavilion, when Yiguchen exuded that mysterious aura, all the light balls seemed to boil and gathered toward Yiguchen. No, impossible, this concept is. Heart integrated into sword. Murong Ditian shook his head. He couldn't believe it and didn't want to believe it. Sword cultivators who could comprehend heart integrated into sword were even rarer than sword cultivators who comprehended ordinary sword intents. Heart integrated into sword meant that one had a very deep understanding of the sword Dao to be able to comprehend it. Yiguchen only comprehended heart integrated into sword completely after entering Lotus Village's sword heart spring. Therefore, Murong Ditian only knew that Yiguchen possessed heart integrated into sword until now. Although not everyone possessed the enlightened sword heart, the majority of the people knew about it. Therefore, when Yiguchen spread out this concept, it caused a series of shock and astonishment. This. Pan Shuelian opened her red mouth and didn't know what kind of expression to show. That bitter and unkind mocking expression still remained on her face, making her look rather comical. Prince Yuani's expression was also frozen. He seemed to have recalled the fear of being suppressed by Yiguchen's strength in the infinite plains. Not only these people but Wang Xiaotian and the rest of the inner yard disciples also felt as if they were in a dream. They couldn't believe everything that was happening before their eyes. Who would have believed that a person who had lost all his true qi could actually attract all the light balls and even grab a large number of them casually? Yiguchen can actually attract so many light balls. The inner yard disciples who were watching coldly from the sidelines were now looking at the surging light balls in a daze. Their eyes were red and they were panting heavily. That wasn't a Xiantian sword art, but a spiritual sword art. Even among the 7 big forces, it wasn't something that could be obtained easily. Yiguchen stood there calmly, not taking the initiative to grab the ball of light. However, those balls of light were like a school of fish, revolving around Yiguchen. Here, Xingzhu. This is what you wanted. Yiguchen casually waved his hand, and the crimson ball of light that Mu Xingzhu had her eyes on obediently fell into Yiguchen's hand like a pet. Thank you, senior brother Yi. Mu Xingzhu's eyes widened, and there was an unconcealable joy in her eyes. The young man she admired always seemed to be able to create miracles that no one else could. Brother Chu, I see that you've been staring at this ball of light for a long time. Yiguchen waved his hand again, and another ball of light landed in front of Chu Qingqi. This. Chu Qingqi hesitated for a moment, a trace of passion in his eyes, but he didn't argue and directly accepted it. Come, Yi Xie, this is for you. Seeing Yiguchen casually give away precious balls of light, the expressions of Murong Ditian and the others were as if they had eaten a dead fly. Pan Shuelian couldn't endure it any longer. She stared at the crimson ball of light floating in the air and directly reached out with her hand, wanting to snatch it. Yiguchen glanced at it and faintly smiled. He gently waved his hand, and the ball of light directly flew towards Yiguchen. Yiguchen! Pan Shuelian was furious. Her snow-white face was filled with extreme anger, and her ample chest was heaving up and down. She was clearly quite angry. It wasn't just Pan Shuelian. Murong Ditian, Prince Yuani and the others all wanted to snatch the balls of light, but they were all dispersed by Yiguchen with a casual wave of his hand, and those balls of light all landed beside him. Yiguchen, you're cheating. Cheating? I can't accept this. Won't the Sword Pavilion's opportunity be snatched away by Yiguchen alone? This isn't fair at all. At this moment, Yiguchen's enemies were all sullen in their hearts. This feeling was like having a treasure mountain in front of them, only to discover that the treasure mountain already had an owner, and they couldn't even obtain a single strand of hair. Unfair? Heh, who was the one who thought that they could monopolize the opportunity outside the Sword Pavilion? You've already thrown fairness to the back of your minds, so why should I care? Yiguchen said indifferently with his hands behind his back. That's right. Yiguchen is an inner court disciple. No one can touch him. Bai Zichen, who didn't obtain anything, took a step forward and spoke in a righteous tone. Yiguchen raised his brows and looked at Bai Zichen. Bai Zichen didn't have such an attitude outside the Sword Pavilion. Damn it. Murong Ditian and the others had cold expressions when they saw Bai Zichen and the others step forward. They couldn't casually deal with Yiguchen anymore. Zither Fairy, I saw that you were looking at this clump of light. Yiguchen caught a glimpse of Zither Fairy's beautiful eyes and immediately sent a ball of light towards her. Thank you, young Master Yi. Zither Fairy was pleasantly surprised. She was indeed compatible with this clump of light. Pan Shuelian's face turned fiendish when she saw this. She gnashed her teeth and was so angry that her body trembled. By Yenji, this seems to be to your liking. Brother Chini, we haven't known each other for long, so I'll give this to you as a gift. Yiguchen casually waved his hand. Those who were friends with Yiguchen or those who had good karma with him all received the clumps of light they wanted. They looked at Yiguchen with either joy or gratitude. The scene of Yiguchen casually giving out clumps of light was also seen by everyone in the inner courtyard. Every time he gave out a clump of light, the hearts of the inner courtyard disciples would tremble. Only Yiguchen would give away these precious spiritual level swordsmanship as if they were cabbages. Not to mention Li Lingxiao, Ting Jingshan and the others, even Bai Zichen had a trace of passion hidden in his eyes. Yiguchen, give some clumps of light to the disciples of the inner courtyard. Bai Zichen could no longer remain indifferent as he spoke with a righteous tone. He didn't want Yiguchen to give the clumps of light to him alone, but to all the disciples of the inner courtyard. That's right. Yiguchen, as an inner courtyard disciple, you should help our sect. That's right. Jin Zongyi, since you have the ability, then contribute it. We will also be grateful to you. Those disciples who were watching by the side spoke out. Even Wang Xiaotian, who had a grudge with Yiguchen, kept his mouth shut at this moment. After all, with the benefits before them, no one wanted to offend Yiguchen at this moment. You guys previously agreed with Murong Ditian and didn't allow Senior Brother Yi to enter the Sword Pavilion. You guys think that Senior Brother Yi doesn't have the ability to obtain the opportunity, but you guys actually have the face to say such words. A look of disdain appeared on Mu Xingzhu's face. When Ji Ling saw this, she let out a soft sigh and revealed a bitter smile. She was still planning to give some clumps of light to Yiguchen as compensation. But looking at it now, even Ji Ling felt that her thoughts were laughable. Yiguchen should have already known, right? That's why he's so calm. This person is truly a monster. Even Ji Ling, who had an extraordinary cultivation, could only sigh at this moment. Yiguchen's eyes flickered as he faced the crimson eyes of the inner court disciples. With a faint smile, he said, "All right, sure. Brother Yi." Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, and the others wanted to say something but hesitated. "Ah, this is Sword Sect Master Yi. You're really magnanimous," laughed some inner court disciples. Yiguchen waved his hand and a portion of the clumps of light landed in the hands of some inner court disciples. But it wasn't all of the inner court disciples, but the inner court disciples who were ashamed outside the Sword Pavilion. "Senior Brother Yi, this..." Those disciples wanted to say something, but hesitated. Their faces were flushed red. "Senior Brother Yi, we're ashamed to accept it," sighed a disciple. "You guys take it." Yiguchen waved his hand and didn't mind it. Those inner court disciples revealed grateful expressions. Clearly, in their eyes, Yiguchen's figure was much taller than Bai Zichen and the others, and they respected him even more. "Senior Brother Yi, what about us?" "Sword Sect Master Yi, you can't be so unfair, right?" Those disciples who were watching coldly from the sidelines, including Bai Zichen, Wang Xiaotian, Li Lingxiao, Ting Jingshan, and the others, didn't receive any clumps of light. "Yiguchen, what's the meaning of this? Are you trying to cause internal strife?" Bai Zichen frowned slightly and reprimanded. Yiguchen didn't pay any attention to him. Not only that, but those inner court disciples who were indebted to Yiguchen also looked coldly at Bai Zichen and gathered around Yiguchen. They didn't want to be in the same group as Bai Zichen and the others. Bai Zichen's face was ashen. Chapter 294. Bai Zichen knew that he had an extremely high reputation in the sword sect forest of pagodas. After the incident at the Single Sword Cliff, Bai Zichen had received even more respect from all the inner court disciples. However, at this moment he was unable to back down and his expression was stiff. Not only him, but Wang Xiaonan, Li Lingxiao and the others were also incomparably envious when they saw the clumps of light revolving around Yiguchen and wished that they could immediately go up and fight for them. However, they also knew that with Yiguchen around, it would be very difficult for them to obtain the clumps of light. This caused the inner court disciples, including Bai Zichen, to feel incomparably sullen and uncomfortable in their hearts. Especially those disciples who had spoken sarcastically earlier, all of them wished that they could give themselves a big slap in the face. "If I had known earlier, I wouldn't have said so much nonsense. Damn it, my mouth is really cheap." This group of inner court disciples was filled with regret, and there were even some who had concealed coldness in their eyes as they looked at Wang Xiaoyan and the others. If it wasn't for Wang Xiaotian and the others taking the lead, these disciples wouldn't have followed suit. Looking at those clown-like inner court disciples, Yiguchen shook his head slightly and ignored them. At this moment, practically all the clumps of light in the entire second level of the sword pavilion were revolving around Yiguchen, causing the current Yiguchen to look rather imposing and unfathomable. "Yiguchen, don't be too pleased with yourself." Murong Ditian nearly shattered his teeth as he turned to look at Xian Hao with a steely face and cupped his hands. "Senior brother Xian Hao, please make your move." With Murong Ditian's pride, he wasn't willing to submit to anyone. However, in this current situation, The only one who could suppress Yiguchen was Xianhao. Xianhao's black and white hair fluttered without wind. He was the first to enter the second level. However, he still didn't make any move and didn't have any intention of making a move to grab the clumps of light. To Xianhao, spiritual sword techniques were still nothing to him. Senior brother Xianhao, that Yiguchen is too arrogant. Please make your move. Murong Ditian forcefully suppressed the unwillingness in his heart and begged. That's right. Senior brother Xianhao, please make your move. Xianying also cupped his fists together. The group of Limitless Sword Sect disciples all shouted in unison, not wanting Yiguchen to monopolize the limelight. Xianhao's gaze was indifferent. He glanced at Yiguchen and said indifferently, Yiguchen, you have indeed exceeded my expectations. Yiguchen's brows furrowed slightly. Facing Xianhao, he felt tremendous pressure. Although I'm not interested in the second level's spiritual sword technique, it's not good for you to monopolize it. As soon as Xianhao finished speaking, he also stomped on the ground with one foot. Then, a wave of profound sword concept spread out. Along with the release of this concept, the white and black swords on his back seemed to vibrate as well, as if they had sensed something. This is... After Xianhao emitted that concept, everyone present felt a profound and unfathomable pressure. Some of the weaker cultivators even felt like they were suffocating. That's... Yiguchen's face froze slightly. What Xianhao emitted was not the heart integrated into sword essence. It was sword essence. However, that sword essence was extremely vague in Yiguchen's perception, and it did not feel like the void sword essence. Unformed sword essence? Yiguchen suddenly understood. The reason why Yiguchen felt that the sword essence was very vague was that Xianhao's sword essence had not yet formed. Xianhao has already inherited the peerless void sword essence. With this vague sword essence, doesn't it mean that he has two sword essences? No wonder he has such a great reputation. Yiguchen finally knew how powerful Xianhao was. As the top genius of the Limitless Sword Sect's Sun Moon Hall, Xianhao's strength was indeed worthy of his reputation to be able to leave his name on the sword-seeking steel. As Xianhao's sword essence was emitted, some of the dancing light balls were also drawn to it. Yiguchen's eyes flashed, and the heart integrated into sword essence became more intense. Then, he directly put most of the light balls into his origin ring. Xianhao only got a small part. However, he did not care and casually threw these light balls to the group of people from the Limitless Sword Sect. What about us, Master Xianhao? Pan Shuoyan's expression was unnatural. She slowly swayed her waist and walked forward, trying to lift her large breasts with a flattering smile on her face. Xianhao's eyes were indifferent. He did not even look at Pan Shuoyan, and closed his eyes to rest. Pan Shuoyan's smile froze on her face. Not only her, but Ji Yen, Prince Yuanyi, and the others also looked extremely uncomfortable. They had gained nothing on the second level of the Sword Pavilion. They came empty-handed and left empty-handed. Yiguchen. Prince Yuanyi's veins were bulging on his forehead, and his fists were tightly clenched. Your Highness, don't be impatient. Cast a long line to catch a big fish, the young Marquis Fangchen said in a low voice, his eyes surging with a cold luster. That's right. So what if Yiguchen got an opportunity? I'll make him spit it all out sooner or later. Prince Yuanyi suppressed the grievance and anger in his heart and took a deep breath. As Yiguchen and Xianhao divided all the light balls on the second level of the Sword Pavilion, the remaining cultivators' expressions kept changing. They all looked at Yiguchen like hungry wolves looking at a piece of fat meat. However, there were also many people on Yiguchen's side. Chen Yi, Zither Fairy, Bai Yanji, and the others were all close to Yiguchen. It was because of this that the atmosphere on the second level of the Sword Pavilion fell into a frozen, stifling atmosphere. At this moment, the formation in the center of the second level was activated again. As the light surged, the formation that led to the third level was activated. It's the entrance to the third level of the Sword Pavilion. Everyone's gazes landed on the array. If the spiritual level sword technique on the second level of the Sword Pavilion was worth fighting for, then the king-level sword technique on the third level of the sword pavilion was enough to make people go crazy. As soon as the formation was activated, Xian Hao, who had been indifferent and casual, suddenly had a bright flash in his eyes. I've been waiting for this moment. Xian Hao's eyes were extremely bright. Xian Hao had obtained the void sword technique on the second level of the sword pavilion. But at the same time, Xian Hao sensed through the void sword technique that there was an extremely powerful king-level sword technique on the third level of the sword pavilion that was closely related to the void sword technique. It was because of this that Xian Hao came to the void sword realm again. He came for two purposes. The first was naturally the place of heavenly thunder that Xian Mo had mentioned. The second was the king-level sword technique on the third level of the sword pavilion that was related to the void sword technique. That king-level sword technique is related to the void sword technique. If combined with my void sword essence, I have a chance of winning even against Yan Wushuang, Gu Zun, and the others. Xian Hao took a step forward. Just as he was about to step into the formation, he was stopped by a ray of divine light and was directly blasted back. Even Xian Hao was stopped. Many disciples widened their eyes when they saw this scene. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered. Chu Qingqi had previously said that there seemed to be some harsh conditions to enter the third level of the sword pavilion. But so far, none of the geniuses from the 7 major forces had been able to enter the third level. Oh, is that so? Xian Hao's eyes were inexplicable, and then a mysterious sword essence erupted again. This sword essence was not the vague sword essence from before, but the peerless sword essence of the void. As the sword essence of the void spread out, everyone felt as if there were countless transparent sword qi flowing in the void, shuttling back and forth. The sharp edge was shocking. Is this the sword essence of the void? Yi Guchen's eyes were also extremely dignified. Xian Hao was supported by the sword essence of the void. He took a step forward and directly stepped into the formation in front of everyone's shocked eyes. He went in. Senior brother Xian Hao has entered the third level. Many people from the Limitless Sword sect exclaimed. Xingzhu, you guys stay here? Yi Guchen said in a deep voice. Even with Yi Guchen's talent and strength, he could not bring anyone up to the third level. His eyes flickered, and he made a judgment in his heart. Does the condition to enter the third level of the sword pavilion require a peerless sword essence? Such a condition is indeed harsh. Yi Guchen's lips curved into a smile. Even in the ancient void sword sect, few people could possess a peerless sword essence. The next moment, Yi Guchen also took a step forward, wanting to enter the third level. Yi Guchen, he actually wants to enter the third level? Let's wait and see. I don't believe that Yi Guchen can enter again. Murong Ditian, Prince Yuani, Pan Shuelyan, and the others stared at Yi Guchen's back. On this side, Bai Zichen, Ji Ling, Wang Xiaotian, and the others also did not blink. Looking at those complicated gazes, Yi Guchen's state of mind was incomparably calm. In an instant, Yi Guchen's eyes were swallowed by the color of blood. A horrifying and terrifying aura also erupted like a volcano, erupting and shaking the entire second level of the sword pavilion. Shura sword essence, erupting. Chapter 295. Is that the Azura sword intent? Feeling the terrifying sword intent that exploded from Yi Guchen. Even without the support of true qi, just the aura that was emitted was enough to make people terrified. Some people with weaker cultivations even retreated continuously as they were suffocated by the powerful aura. Yi Guchen? Murong Ditian stared at Yi Guchen with jealousy. As a genius of the sword principle, his only regret was that he had not comprehended sword intent. In his eyes, Yi Guchen, whom he had always looked down on, had comprehended dual sword intent. How could Murong Ditian not be jealous? After activating the Azura sword intent, Yi Guchen's feet flashed as he directly entered the formation. After a flash of light, Yi Guchen appeared on the third level of the sword pavilion. After Yi Guchen went up, a group of people, including Murong Ditian, also wanted to enter. However, in this place, other than Xian Hao and Yi Guchen, the others did not have exceptional sword intent. Even the dark sword intent of the origin annihilation was only of an ordinary grade and could not enter the third level. After that, the image of the third level appeared on the formation. In the entire mysterious third level of the sword pavilion, only Xian Hao and Yi Guqin had entered it. At this moment, Yi Guqin looked over. The third level of the sword pavilion was simple and old, and the ground was covered in dust. It was obvious that it had been silent for many years. Yi Guqin and Xian Hao were separated by some distance as they looked at the center of the sword pavilion at the same time. Compared to the light balls on the first and second level of the sword pavilion, the light balls on the third level were pitifully few. There were only 5 of them. Among the 5 light balls, 4 of them were golden, and 1 of them was dark golden. However, no matter which light ball it was, the waves that it emitted were far more powerful than the light balls on the first and second level. King-level sword technique. At this moment, Yi Guqin and Xian Hao both had the same thought. When faced with a sword technique of this level, even Xian Hao was unable to maintain his usual indifference. That's the one. Xian Hao's gaze locked onto the dark golden ball of light among the 5 balls of light. Xian Hao cultivated the sword of the void and naturally sensed that the dark golden light was connected to the sword of the void. But coincidentally, Yi Guqin also obtained the void sword technique because of Xian Ying. Not only that, but he had also cultivated the void sword technique to the realm of perfection. Therefore, at this moment, Yi Guqin's gaze unconsciously shifted to the dark golden ball of light. The fluctuation of this dark golden light was not only stronger than that of the other 4 golden light balls, but it also gave Yi Guqin a sense of familiarity with it. Does it have anything to do with the void sword technique? Yi Guqin was quite sensitive to swords, so he naturally perceived this fluctuation at this moment. Yi Guqin and Xian Hao flashed towards the dark golden ball of light at almost the same time. This scene was also transmitted to the eyes of everyone on the second floor through the images on the formation. What? Yi Guqin actually dares to snatch the opportunity from Xian Hao? He is overestimating himself. Not to mention that his genuine qi is crippled. Even if he is at his peak, it would be difficult for him to compete with Xian Hao. Seeing that Yi Guqin was snatching the opportunity from Xian Hao, the second floor of the sword pavilion was in an uproar. Especially the disciples of the Limitless Sword sect, they sneered with disdain. Murong Ditian's gloomy face also recovered a little, and he was watching the show coldly. However, among the people who had a grudge against Yi Guqin, Ji Yan and Pan Shuelian did not mock him, because they knew that Yi Guqin had an extremely powerful puppet. Although the puppet is strong, it shouldn't be able to stop Xian Hao, right? Pan Shuelian pondered. Although the blood cloud puppet could force Pan Shuelian to retreat, in Pan Shuelian's opinion, Xian Hao was much stronger than her. No matter how strong the blood cloud puppet was, it would be difficult for it to compete with Xian Hao. On the other side, Mu Xingzu and the others also clenched their fists and stared nervously at Yi Guqin's figure on the screen. Third floor of the sword pavilion. Seeing that Yi Guqin was also taking action, Xian Hao's face revealed a tinge of surprise. Yi Guqin, are you sure you want to take action? Xian Hao said faintly. In his opinion, as long as Yan Wushuang, Gu Zun, the young war emperor and the others did not come, there was almost no one who could stop him from obtaining the opportunity in the void sword realm. As for Yi Guqin, aside from the sword heart illumination and the Azura sword, there was nothing else that Xian Hao cared about. Therefore, Xian Hao also subconsciously thought that even if Yi Guqin entered the third floor, he would only stand there and not dare to snatch the opportunity from him. The opportunity belongs to the fated one. Yi Guqin stretched out his hand and was about to grab the dark golden ball of light. Xian Hao's eyes flashed coldly. No one dared to snatch away what he wanted. In the next moment, Xian Hao slightly raised his hand and did not even bother to draw his sword. He used his finger as a sword and the peerless void sword essence spread out. Then, he pointed his finger and a translucent sword wave instantly pierced through the void and directly flashed towards Yi Guqin's chest. This casual flick of his finger was enough to kill an expert in the 5th transformation divine soul realm. Feeling the sharp finger radiance, Yi Guqin's face changed slightly. Xian Hao was indeed a top genius. His battle strength was not on the same level as the young Flame Emperor and the others. Only Yi Guqin, who had made a breakthrough, was qualified to compete with him. Swoosh! A blood shadow flashed out of Yi Guqin's origin ring. It was the blood cloud centipede. Xian Hao's finger radiance fell on the blood cloud centipede and the sound of metal clashing could be heard. The blood cloud centipede took 2 steps back. Yi Guqin took the opportunity to grab the dark golden ball of light and put it into his origin ring. Seeing this, Xian Hao's originally indifferent expression changed instantly, as if his reverse scale had been touched. No one can take away what I want. Xian Hao's feet flashed and an unparalleled sword aura exploded from the void. It actually surrounded Yi Guqin from all directions. Yi Guqin commanded the blood cloud centipede to attack Xian Hao. At the same time, he used the wave-like subtle steps. Although he lost the support of his true qi and was a little slower, he was still able to deal with it. Just as Yi Guqin snatched the dark golden ball of light, the formation in the middle of the 3rd level suddenly bloomed with light. As the entire sword pavilion trembled, rays of light rose into the sky from outside the sword pavilion. Immediately, everyone in the sword pavilion, including Yi Guqin and Xian Hao on the 3rd level, were directly sent to the valley outside the sword pavilion. The entire sword pavilion was sealed by the defensive formation again. All of a sudden, many figures appeared outside the valley, including Yi Guqin's figure. Bang! On the other side, the blood cloud centipede collided with Xian Hao's attack and then dispersed. For a moment, the entire valley fell into a suffocating silence. Xian Hao stared at Yi Guqin. Although there was no look of anger on his face, all the disciples of the Limitless Sword sect knew that the angrier Xian Hao was, the quieter he was. Yi Guqin is going to be unlucky. Some people, including Pan Shuelian, looked at Yi Guqin gloatingly. Although Yi Guqin had the blood cloud centipede as his trump card, Xian Hao was definitely not easy to deal with. The entire valley was filled with a strong smell of gunpowder. Xian Hao took a step forward. His tone was very calm, but his eyes were bottomless. Yi Guqin, I'll give you one more chance. Hand over the ball of light, and I can let you live. This was Xian Hao's ultimatum. However, I'm sorry, but this Ye's path has always been one that I walk myself, and not one that others give me charity. Yi Guqin's expression was indifferent and did not leave any leeway. Then I'll make your way to a dead end. Xian Hao did not say anything else. His aura completely erupted. Chapter 296. The 9 transformations of the Divine Soul Realm was the highest realm among all the elites. Following the complete eruption of Xian Hao's aura, that powerful aura swept out like a tornado. As expected of Xian Hao, this aura spread out like a storm. Not to mention the weaker disciples, even Qin Yi, Ji Yan, Fang Chen, and the other geniuses felt their chests tighten. It was very stifling. The pressure that Xian Hao brought to the others was too great. Yi Guqin, don't think that you can do whatever you want with a puppet. No one can stop me from killing you. Xian Hao took a step forward and disappeared instantly. How is that possible? Where did Xian Hao go? Everyone's expressions changed when they saw Xian Hao suddenly disappear. Such a strange and unfathomable technique caused everyone to be afraid. Swoosh! Yi Guqin's eyes flashed and a vigorous soul power spread out. The soul power was no weaker than a divine soul realm expert who had condensed a sea of consciousness. Retreat! Yi Guqin's soul power suddenly sensed something and he quickly retreated. In the next moment, a sword finger pointed out from the void and revealed Xian Hao's figure. Is that teleportation? Some people were shocked when they saw Xian Hao's strange figure appear. This kind of speed, this kind of method, was simply unfathomable. Is it the sword essence of the void that gave him the ability? Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. Others might not know, but Yi Guqin knew. For example, the Azura sword essence gave him the ability to use the Eye of Azura. Xian Hao's extreme speed that was almost like traversing the void was obviously an ability given to him by the sword essence of the void. As expected of a peerless sword essence. Yi Guqin frowned. Even he felt that it was very troublesome. On the other side, Xian Hao was surprised. Obviously, he did not expect Yi Guchen, who had not broken through to the divine soul realm, to have such a vigorous and sharp soul power that could sense his movement. So what? You will always be in a passive position. Xian Hao attacked again. His feet flashed and his figure suddenly disappeared. Blood Cloud Mantis. Yi Guchen growled. The blood cloud centipede stomped on the ground and instantly returned to Yi Guchen's side. Right at that moment, Xian Hao's figure appeared once more. This time, he wasn't empty-handed. Instead, he was holding a pitch-black sword. It was one of the two swords on his back. Senior brother Xian Hao has taken out the profound Yin sword. Many disciples of the Limitless Sword sect exclaimed. It was no wonder that they were so astonished. With Xian Hao's abilities and status, he rarely used the sword on his back. It was because there were not many people of the same generation who were qualified for him to use his mystical rune divine weapon. Rain God Sword Technique, Sorrowful Rain. Xian Hao held the Dark Yin sword and activated the spirit pattern array on the sword. In an instant, the surrounding heaven and earth seemed to become gloomy and cold. The air was damp and filled with water vapor. Yi Guchen's eyes narrowed. The water vapor was not real water vapor, but sword energy. Countless sword chi condensed like rain. With the support of the profound Yin sword's ability, it was like a sorrowful rain of swords. Crush. Every drop of rain was a beam of sword chi. With a flip of his hand, Yi Guchen summoned the soft sword of Fallen Star. Once the sword momentum was unleashed, it was as explosive as fire, resisting the sword rain that filled the sky. At the same time, the blood cloud centipede stood in front of Yi Guchen to protect him. It punched out and the air screamed as it resisted the sword rain. Clang, clang, clang. Countless sword rain fell on the blood cloud centipede's body and instantly, there was a dense sound of metal clashing. However, the blood cloud centipede was a puppet and such attacks were useless against it. There were only many dents on its body. At the same time, Yi Guchen also used the fledgling form of the fire sword essence to resist the remaining sword rain. Although he couldn't use his genuine chi, Yi Guchen could use the power of the vermilion bird totem. His sword momentum spread out like a raging fire and clashed with Xian Hao's sword momentum. Sword chi burst out continuously. Yi Guchen also retreated continuously. If not for his perfect physical body and the invincible Vajra body, Yi Guchen would not be able to resist Xian Hao even if he used the fledgling form of the fire sword essence. This is? Xian Hao's expression changed slightly for the first time. He knew that Yi Guchen had two sword essences. However, although the sword essence that Yi Guchen displayed was only in its fledgling form, it was not any of the sword essences that Yi Guchen had previously possessed. Could you have comprehended a new sword essence? Even Xian Hao's expression changed slightly when he thought of this. If it were an ordinary sword cultivator, it would be extremely difficult to comprehend even an ordinary sword essence. Even someone as talented as Xian Hao had only obtained the void sword essence by chance. As for the other sword essence, he had been comprehending it since he was young but had not completely comprehended it until now. How can this Yi Guchen? Killing intent flashed in Xian Hao's eyes. He was arrogant and didn't think that anyone could surpass him. He was confident even when facing Yan Wushuang, Gu Zun, and the others. However, he was now a little wary of Yi Guchen. Without saying anything, Xian Hao attacked again. His sword was like rain, and with the support of the Dark Yin sword, it was even more powerful. Boom, boom, boom. The blood cloud puppet attacked and collided with Xian Hao's sword, causing a loud explosion and shockwaves to spread out. The rest of the people in the surroundings were all trembling with fear. For example, Murong Ditian and the others had solemn expressions. Although they wanted to surround and kill Yi Guchen, Ji Ling, Zither Fairy, Chen Yi, and the others were on the other side. Therefore, a delicate balance was maintained. No one dared to attack casually. Yi Guchen won't be able to hold on sooner or later. He wants to fight senior brother Xian Hao with just a puppet. The spectators could see that Yi Guchen's situation wasn't good. He was coughing up blood from Xian Hao's attacks. Even with the help of the blood cloud puppet, His injuries were getting worse. Senior brother Yi. On the other side, Mu Xingzhu and the others were extremely worried. However, because of Murong Ditian and the others, they couldn't help either. On the battlefield, Yi Guchen's expression didn't change. He was thinking of a solution. With the current strength of the demonic cloud blood crystal, it won't be able to hold on for long if I use the life and death chamber. With Xian Hao's identity, the limitless sword sect will definitely give him a life-saving item. At that time, if the blood cloud puppet can't kill him and loses its energy source, I won't be in a good situation. Even in such a life and death situation, Yi Guchen was still thinking and analyzing calmly. Although his injuries were getting worse, he had the recovery ability of his perfect physical body. Therefore, he wasn't in any danger for the time being. Just as Yi Guchen was thinking of a way to break out of this situation, there was a huge commotion in a region not far from the sword pavilion. That region flickered with brilliance and a fragrance filled the sky. That kind of abnormality couldn't be concealed. That place is the pill hall. The pill hall has opened. Let's go. There's a great opportunity in that place. We can get supreme-grade elixirs. I heard that there might be quasi-sage elixirs in there. Sensing the huge commotion in that region, everyone outside the sword pavilion couldn't stay calm anymore. Even Murong Ditian, Pan Shuelyan and the others were breathing rapidly. They didn't get anything in the sword pavilion. It was like drawing water with a bamboo basket. However, in the pill hall, everyone had a fair chance to get an opportunity. Let's go. At this moment, no one hesitated anymore. They couldn't care less about the battle between Yi Guchen and Xian Hao. Instead, they flew towards the pill hall. Chapter 297. The pill hall was a famous place of opportunity in the Void Sword realm. Many people had obtained opportunities there. Compared to the sword pavilion, the opportunities in the pill hall were easier to obtain. The pill hall wasn't far away from the sword pavilion. Hence, everyone outside the valley was heading towards the pill hall. Yi Guchen and Xian Hao, who were fighting, had obviously sensed the changes in the pill hall. Xian Hao's eyes flickered slightly. Xian Hao was also slightly interested in the opportunities in the pill hall. After all, elixirs were extremely important resources for martial artists. Even with Xian Hao's status and strength, the limitless sword sect wouldn't give him all the resources. No one would complain about having too many elixirs. Xian Hao, are you still going to fight with me here? Although I might not be able to defeat you now, you won't be able to do anything to me for the time being. Yi Guchen's eyes flickered as he continued to say. Or are you saying that the opportunities in the pill hall are useless to you? Yi Guchen's expression was calm. Although he had suffered some injuries, he had strong blood qi and recovery ability. Hence, he didn't show any signs of weakness. Xian Hao stopped his sword and looked deeply at Yi Guchen. His expression was also calm. He didn't get angry because of Yi Guchen's words. Based on this point alone, Xian Hao's temperament had far surpassed Murong Ditian and the others. You should be glad that you can live for a while longer. Xian Hao kept the dark Yin sword behind his back. His black eyes were as cold as ice. Xian Hao didn't get angry, nor did he say any harsh words. He turned around and headed towards the pill hall. The reason why he did that was because he was extremely confident that Yi Guchen wouldn't be able to escape from his grasp. Senior Yi, are you all right? Mu Xingzhu and the others went forward and asked with concern. I'm fine. Let's go to the pill hall, said Yi Guchen. Although Xian Hao would also go to the pill hall, Yi Guchen didn't want to miss such a great opportunity because of Xian Hao. After that, everyone around the Sword Pavilion Valley flew towards the pill hall. The pill hall was very close to the Sword Pavilion. It was a magnificent hall that was gilded with gold. Under the erosion of time, it revealed an ancient and heavy feeling. At this moment, the formation outside the pill hall was emitting light and trembling. The entire pill hall was also emitting light. At the same time, a strong fragrance of Dan Qi permeated the air, making people feel comfortable all over. When Yi Guchen and the others arrived outside the pill hall, they couldn't help but sigh. As expected of a great sect from ancient times, Its foundation was indeed not something that the current 7 great powers could compare to. Brother Yi, the pill hall's method of obtaining opportunities is quite unique, Chu Qingqi said. Oh, is it different from the sword pavilion? Yi Guchen asked curiously. Do you see the pill furnace in front of the hall and the 10 prayer mats around it? Chu Qingqi pointed. Yi Guchen followed his gaze and saw a bronze pill furnace standing in the middle of the hall. The pill furnace had 3 legs and 2 handles. Its exterior was a simple and mottled bronze color. The fragrance of Dan Qi in the hall was coming from the pill furnace. Other than that, there were 10 prayer mats that were covered in dust around the pill furnace. Could it be that the pill hall's elixirs are in the pill furnace? Yi Guchen asked. That's right. There's a powerful formation around the pill furnace. It's impossible to obtain the elixirs by force. The only way to obtain the elixirs is to sit on the prayer mats around it. Those prayer mats have the ability to test a martial artist's talent, Chu Qingqi explained. It can test one's talent? Yi Guchen revealed a strange expression. His strange expression wasn't because of the prayer mat's ability. Instead, it was because he was thinking about how high his talent had reached. Thinking about it, even Yi Guchen couldn't determine how high his talent was. It shouldn't be too bad, right? Yi Guchen thought to himself. At this moment, the pill hall square was filled with people from various forces. From afar, a few ferocious figures flew over. The people in the lead were Demon Blade Nieling, Blood Blade Mo Juechen and Mad Blade Shen Tumiao. It's the people from the Saber-conferred King's Palace. As the people from the Saber-conferred King's Palace arrived, the atmosphere in the pill hall square became turbulent. Yi Guchen, Mo Juechen's voice was filled with boundless hatred as he spoke. He stared coldly at Yi Guchen like a bloodthirsty wolf. Previously, the sword pavilion wasn't attractive to the people from the Saber-conferred King's Palace. However, when the pill hall opened, the people from the Saber-conferred King's Palace sensed it and naturally came over. Yi Guchen is really unlucky now, Pan Shuelian gloated. Xian Hao was in front of him and Mo Juechen was behind him. They weren't people to be trifled with. Murong Ditian and the others were also watching coldly from the side. They seemed to want to see Yi Guchen being killed. This was the only way to vent the anger in their hearts. Mo Juechen, are you going to take action? Yi Guchen's tone was cold. Beside him, the blood cloud centipede took a step forward. With a boom, the entire pill hall square seemed to shake. Mo Juechen glanced at the blood cloud centipede and said coldly, "The dignified sword sect can only rely on puppets?" Then I would also like to ask. Even one of the 3 blades of the Saber-conferred King's Palace, Blood Blade, would take advantage of the situation and attack me when I can't use my true qi. Do you have the guts to fight me again when I recover? Yi Guchen didn't back down. You still have the time to recover? What a joke! Pan Shuelian said with a sharp voice. With a mocking smile, she looked at Yi Guchen with disdain. Yi Guchen, you're really indulging in fantasy. You're delusional enough to think that you can undo the technique of the Starry Sword Pavilion's genius? Murong Ditian said coldly. It's useless to say more. Yi Guchen shook his head slightly. Mo Juechen looked at the blood cloud centipede coldly and looked at the bronze cauldron again. After pondering for a while, he said coldly, after the pill hall's opportunity, Yi Guchen will definitely die. It was obvious that Mo Juechen was the same as Xian Hao. He didn't want to lose the pill hall's opportunity because of fighting with Yi Guchen. Yi Guchen didn't say anything else. Although the fight had stopped for the time being, the atmosphere was still filled with the smell of gunpowder. Everyone from the 7 major forces knew that there would be a bloody battle after the pill hall's opportunity. And the target of this bloody battle was the sword sect's Yi Guchen. Rumble. As the pill hall's plaza trembled, the formation around the praying mats also gradually dispersed. The moment the formation dissipated, a few figures leaped out from the dense crowd and landed on the praying mats. There weren't any restrictions on the talent test. Hence, no one fought for it. Everyone had a chance. This was also why the pill hall was fairer than the sword pavilion. Xian Hao and the others weren't in a hurry. They stood there calmly and watched. Some disciples sat on the praying mats and were excited. Buzz. In the next moment, 10 white light pillars suddenly soared into the sky from the praying mats. Looking at the white light pillars, Yiguchen was a little confused. The white light pillars should represent ordinary talent. Although they can still get elixirs, they should only be of the spirit elixir level. Chu Qingqi said, "Ordinary talent corresponds to spirit elixirs?" Yiguchen suddenly understood. Although there wasn't a clear standard for the grade of elixirs, it could be roughly divided into spirit elixir, treasure elixir, quasi-sage elixir, sage elixir, and so on. It corresponded to spirit elixir, treasure elixir, quasi-sage elixir, and sage elixir. The white light pillars represented ordinary talent. They could only get spirit elixir. With my 7th grade prodigy talent, perfect physique, 1,000 feet sea of qi and so on, what kind of talent is it? Yiguchen was suddenly very curious. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.